Yes, the recording is in progress. Okay, fine. So today we have actually a little bit of leftover business from last week. Today's shiur was supposed to be the last three sifim of Siman Pei Zayin, make a siyum on a siman, which is a klolim gedalim b'yeser. As it happens, although it seems quite esoteric, today's shiur in terms of applicability, it seems like it's not that applicable, but it probably, in a certain sense, in the field of kashrus, it maybe has more application than almost anything else. But first, let's first share the screen here. And 1 second. There's something you have to do to Zoom to make it. 1 second, slideshow. I wanted to take up the whole screen. Okay, that's fine. I have to do something to Zoom to make sure it shows sound with videos, right? Optimize for video clip. Yeah, okay, good. Fine. That will just have one little video later on. Okay, so here we are. So this is the shiur number 3, Siman Pei Zayin, Sif Tes through Yud Aleph, but we do have leftover from Sif Vav. So if you recall that there were 4 different cases that the Ramah brought in Sif Vav from the Gedela Ashkenaz, and Darkei Moshe brings it at the very beginning of the Siman. For whatever reason, he brings it here at the end of the Siman, and yeah, so the first one we mentioned about the Ramah said also lachtes esaish tachas kedera shel goy shem yivashel bosor b'chalav. And we spoke about the idea of psik reisha and a suffix psik reisha that you don't even know whether there's any bosor b'chalav there. And we spoke about the different possibilities. Maybe in the goy's pot, maybe there's bosor b'chalav inside. Then your mamish cooking bosor b'chalav. Maybe it's just a fleish kapat and there's milk inside. Then you have tam ke'ikr, that's also bosor b'chalav. And what's the din? There are those that are machmer, even if it's just a tam, if it's just the taste of bosor b'chalav, and it's something which is not meat or not milk being cooked inside. In any case, we see that lechatchila Ramah is nevertheless worried, and he prohibits you even to stir the fire, and there's no intention whatsoever to cook. Nevertheless, he prohibits it. We discussed that last week. The second case, yeah, the Shach said even bebeis Yisrael shema yachte Yehudim, and therefore you have to give the goyim 2 different sets of pots. But we don't see such a chumrah even when people have a living that's cooking or his or her own food, that they should have separate pots for milchik and fleishik to keep the balabas from being aver this or bosor b'chalav, because maybe he'll stir the pot. We don't see that there's such a minhag. Okay, so that was the first din of the Ramah. Din number 2 in the Ramah, ein lasis lebehema lishtes shayri shel bosor b'chalav yachtov. In Lashon Ramah, if you have your Shulchan Aruch, Eid Kosfu, the ein la'arif, there's Lashon Ramah, imayim shedich behem kli bosor, imayim shedich behem kli chalav, v'litan lifnei behem b'dasonim ba'ana. That the way they would wash the dishes, then you had a big keli, a fleshka keli, and you put all your fleshka dishes in it, and you would heat it up. Hey, where'd you get hot water from? You put it on the fire, and you heated up the water. Voila, hot water. And then you did the same thing from the milchak kelim, so you're not going to waste it when you throw it out. And this is where we ended off last time. So what about mixing together? You're not going to waste it. The behema could get some more nourishment, and you'll get a fatter behema, a healthier behema. So the Ramah says that you shouldn't do it because it's asar b'hano. Yeah. So the Shach says, how is it asar b'hano? Just to mix it together. So it must be that they're both reischim, says the Shach. And why else would there be asar hano? It must be that they will cook together, because it wasn't derech bishul. So then there's no Isser Hana. We learned at the very beginning of the Siman that it's only Isser D'Rabbanan, and there's no Isser Bishul, there's no Isser Hana. So therefore we must say that it was that they were both hot. And you have to go further, as the Achreinim point out. It's not just that they were both hot. because the klisheni in general, we say, is not mavashal, so it had to be a klidishin, or at least a yiri klidishin, and they had to make sure there's no bittul b'shishim, and only then would be a case of Isser Hana. But the Rabbi Kiva Eger that we mentioned briefly, I believe, at the beginning of the Simon, brought down this Minchas Yankiv. All the Achreinim ask, if there's Isser Hana, so how are you pouring together the water lechatchila? The only time you're going to have Isser Hana if there was Isser Bishul. So if there's Isser Bishul, how are you allowed to pour them together in the first place? Manavshach. So if there's no Isser Bishul and you're allowed to do it, and there's no Isser Hana either, and if there is Isser Hana, then why are we saying that you can't feed it to the cow, you can't feed it to the behemoths, you can't even mix it together, even to throw in the garbage, because you have Isser Bishul. So all different answers are given Nachreinim, but the Minchas Yankiv has an answer that is quoted by the Rabbi Kiva Eger, that even if there's no Isser Bishul, and there's not Midiaraisa Isser Hana, but Lechatchila, to cause a mixture of Bosor b'chalav, even though technically there's no Isser, nevertheless, Lechatchila, you shouldn't do it. And many Achrein, they pass like this Minchas Yankiv, that Lechatchila, to make a mixture of milk and meat, even if it's not, technically speaking, wasn't cooked together, wasn't derech bishul, and you don't have Isser Hana on it, nevertheless, it should be avoided. As Minchas Yankiv saying. And it's just very interesting parsha to go into, but we don't really have the time, the different diukim, where it is this comes from. But this is, as I said, quoted by many very important Rabbi Kiva Egers over here in this simon. Case number 3. So the Ramah says, we'll read it first inside in the Ramah. Eid kosvu, the klisha eisen by mayim lachbibas harosh. They would cook up water to make shampoo. And l'shamish, but you can't use that pot. So this is a pot, which is, I don't know how they picked this pot, but this is a pot which is made to cook up water to make shampoo. How did the old style shampoo get put together? They would take ashes from the top of the stove, that there would be sometimes milk that would spill on the stovetop, and sometimes meat that would spill on the stovetop. And they would take that ashes and put it in the water to make shampoo. So for the same reason, when you have a pot of boiling water that's in a place which is susceptible to absorbing both milk and meat, you also shouldn't do it. So the example that Ramah brings is the town of Beis HaCheref. They would use an oven to heat up the house, and they would have a pot of water there, whether it's old style humidifier to keep the place moist, or whether it was everybody should have hot water available whenever they need it. That was in the middle. So people would put their various pots of milk or meat on different sides of this tanur, and sometimes it would spritz on the pot. So you shouldn't use that pot either, because sometimes it spritzes on the pot, and therefore you shouldn't use it either. That's case number 4. So case number 3 is you shouldn't use the pot because of the afer mayal akira. So the Shach asks, let's talk first about case number 3. So we're worried that there's milk and meat in the ashes. So if there's milk and meat in the ashes, so the Shach asks, it should be asabana. That if you're still worried that there's some remnant and it didn't become totally like the ash wasn't totally burnt, wasn't like ashes like from a cigarette, where you would have no tam left into it and it's mamash kafra. You're worried that it has some sort of tam bosor, some sort of tam cholav didn't get totally burned up over there. So if that's the case, so it should be also banos. How are you allowed to use it? The shaila is how are you allowed to use the afer? And for that matter, once the pot absorbed the tam of the afer, how are you allowed to use it? How are you allowed to have hana from it? So it says you're allowed to shampoo using the water and the afer from this pot. It just says you shouldn't use it for food. But if it's bosor b'chalav, bosor b'hana, how are you allowed to use it even for shampooing? L'chor it's hana. So it's a very important klal that comes out of this din with the broad application. Go back for a second. Someone asked, or maybe it was on one of the chats, that the person asked, you're getting indirect hana. We spoke about the case where they brought the material to a lab because they suspected it had bosor b'chalav in it. So if it had bosor b'chalav in it, then you're getting hana because you're finding out what to do with the rest of the food. So when we're talking about hana, isur hana is direct hana. So the shaila is not only are you getting hana for something that had to do epis hashaychus with bosor b'chalav, are you getting hana from bosor b'chalav? So now, if you cooked up in this pot, there was some bosor b'chalav in it, and you make shampoo, is your hair getting hana from tam bosor, tam chalav? Well, if you eat it, you're getting hana from the tam. But this bosor b'chalav is from tam. So let's say you have a pot and it's a treifa pot that had bosor b'chalav in it. So you can't put peiros inside. Later on, we'll see a machaber that says you're allowed to put apples inside. I mean, just because the pot you're not allowed to cook with, it's also all different types of hana. So here you go one step further. If you're using the water for shampoo, but the tam bosor b'chalav that's absorbed in the pot is not helping your hair. And the emes Alter Rebbe brings this in Hilchos Pesach. Alter Rebbe brings Hilchos Pesach if you have a chametz stick pot. So we sell the kelim, we put them away, but technically speaking, there's no reason if there's no chametz be'en on the keli, you don't need to sell the kelim for Pesach. You just have to put it away. It's not going to be used. Let's say you run out of pots and you need to wash some clothing, wash your hair, whatever the case is. Are you allowed to use it? The pot also ba'anar has tam chametz in it. So the answer is that when you wash your clothing doesn't have any hana from the tam chametz. What's asur is hana from tam chametz. Not us, not the pot. We say the pot is asur. Pot's asur because if you're cooking at the time, it's going to come into the food and you're going to get hana from the tam. But the real issur on the tam. That's all that says Hilchos Pesach, and this is the mucker over here. So isur on bosor b'chalav dafke kashernan mi tam bosor b'chalav. That's the issur. Aval b'chafifus harash ain't on mi tam blua be'efer. So the ashes consists of wood or coals, whatever the fuel was, and they got some tam that got absorbed in them. So that you're getting hana from. You're not getting hana from that, from the shampoo, and therefore there's no problem making shampoo. The only problem is that it might be tam bosor b'chalav. And if there's tam bosor b'chalav, you're not allowed to have hana from it.
So what would be an example of just a isur hana without anything else?
What do you mean? A case where it's taka asur?
Yeah, I'm saying like the tom. I'm saying tom is that you're tasting it. So like, how do you separate an isur hana from a isur achila?
If you sell it, you're getting money. With that money, you can buy food.
So how is that benefiting from the tom?
It's maybe lidei. It's maybe lidei achila. The money is maybe lidei achila.
Right, but you're taking it from the taste of bosor b'chalav. You're selling it.
Yeah, so it's not always direct, but over here, this is more remotely the tam. If you wash your clothing in a chametz stick pot, you're not gaining any money whatsoever from the tam chametz in the pot with your clothing. It's not helping you wash anything. It's not bringing you to any further hana. You're not getting any hana whatsoever. Here you have hana, which will bring lidei achila. That's the whole. This Rashi is it's that lo yachil. You have in the Gemara about whether everything is be'etzem. Every isur achila is also asubana. There's a whole discussion whether we need a miyut or we need a ribui to differentiate between the things like the chametz and bosor b'chalav, which also banor is be'etzem. Everything really is also ba'ana because it may be the achila. We need an exclusion from psukim. It's another discussion in the Gemara. Are the ashes useful?
He says, "Kevin she'inay davar shel achila." Loy chashiva na kevin she'inay nana megufa issa. It seems like he's saying two reasons.
You're talking about the shach.
Yeah, the shach. He said I mean, it says what it says over there on the screen, but he first says that it's inay davar shel achila.
Yeah, but you're right. But again, I'm taking more from really from. Lashon Alter Rebbe putting together how it's learned over here. This is
it's Sivkat Nechaf.
Yeah, Yeah. Like dollars, that's what it's speaking over there about using the keli. Yeah. Fine.
And it almost sounds like it doesn't really matter what his hana is from it. The fact that no one's going to eat this mixture of the afer and basar b'chalav, however you are nana from it, that's already mutter. Or it's
The MS is, you could maybe be medaic over here. This is one of the discussions about cosmetics on Pesach, for example, non-food items that derech hanaase, that let's say a person is using chametz for some sort of non-food item, but that's derech hanaase. The derech of hana is to use it in such a fashion. Let's say somebody's, you have these, whatever the case is, something which has chametz in it, you're not eating it, you're smearing it on your hands, or for some other purpose. So is that called hana? So the ikar hana is achila. If it's not a davar shel achila, so that's not the type of hana that we're normally worried about. Okay, but how to define hana is a very broad topic, and it's important. I'm mentioning it over here. Lagabe the bliya in a keli. The bliya in a keli has to do with tam. Okay, the fourth case he brings, we mentioned about the Tana Beis HaCheref. I don't know if that's exactly what it looked like, a Tana Beis HaCheref. In my mind, it's something which is more open. And as you quoted before, so that Rama says you're not allowed to, you shouldn't, English Tamish. Again, not allowed. We're going to see at the end of the game that Rama is going to say on all of these things, b'diavad, they're going to be mutter. So over here is a very applicable din. Well, there are a few applicable dinim over here. So let's first finish the cases Eben Ufik at first glance, and then we'll talk about them again a little bit. So the Shach says that this Isser, again, we have a Keli Shal Mayim, the Tanur Beis HaCheref. So this Tanur is being used to heat up the house, and there's a pot of water on top of it, and sometimes people use the area on the side in order to sometimes Bosor on this side, Chalav on this side. It's hard for us to imagine such a thing, but in those days, when the ovens, the fuel was coals or wood, so it more closely resembled what we're familiar with from a matzah oven, that you're using that sort of fuel. So to kasher the oven was very, very simple. If it's only Bosor b'chalav, all you need is libun kal. Like the Alter Rebbe says, Lagabe Shavuos, that all you need is libun kal, unless it's a klicheres, then you need libun gomer. If it's made out of cheres, normally you don't kasher cheres, but it's capable of. There, it's built into an oven. It's capable. It's a type of cheres that's capable of withstanding such intense heat. But in any case, normally you only need libun kal. But if you're using one of these old style ovens to make libun gomer, is also no big deal. You just take some of the coals or some of the wood and you put it right on the surface and you kasher it. That's libun gomer. So the Shach says over here, what kind of kelim are we worried about? English tamish bekelim asum becheres dafken. Shalei meila lehem achshara, because you can't kasher normally klicheres. The only way you can kasher a klicheres is with libun gomer. Aval kelim and matches mutal tamish men. Comes the Shach and says you're allowed to use a metal kelim. Because since there's fire burning there all the time, as soon as something falls on it, it's going to be kashered. So if a drop of milk falls on it, but it's open to the fire. So the truth is, the Tanur Beis HaCheref, the way it's described in other places, over here you have a maziva, you have a covering on top, which is between the fire and the keli. If you would imagine that there would be no cover and this pot is hanging with chains or rope, a rope would burn, I guess, but chains from the ceiling. So then it's constantly being kashered, says the Shach. And again, when you're talking about, this is a klal, when you want to kasher a iser from an iser. So if there was something usher, like some chazer juice fell onto the pot, then it needs libun gomer. If it was absorbed with the heat of fire and there was no intermediary of liquid, so then you have to kasher it with fire. If it was a heter bola, so then all it needs is libun kal. So from Bosor l'chalav, let's say you had over there a parva pot of water and some milk spritzed onto the pot. So all you would need is libun kal. You don't have to turn the pot red hot. And since it's matches, cheres, it wouldn't work, but for matches, if it was made out of metal, it will work. So therefore, says the shach, we're not really worried about it because anyway, it's going to be kasher the whole time anyway. So it's a big cooler from the shach. And lahachmer, he says, because it's already going to be constantly kashered as time goes on.
Is this talking about like a public, like heating tanor? Like for, I mean, what's practically, like, how did this practically?
Yeah, I mean, you could have it in a krechma, you could have it in a tanor beis acheret, you could have it in somebody's individual house also. It could be in either one. You're asking how the Bosor b'cholav, how it got mixed up, why the people don't have separate ovens. There's only one oven. So people would use the same one for Bosor b'cholav. Either they use one side for Bosor, one side for cholav, or they would just continually be kashering it because you have ready-made fire over there.
So if you're like traveling, you're in a krechma, you can like, use the kalim that are in there.
Well, here the shaila is using that pot of water. Can you take water? Let's talk our mama lashon. You're in a hotel. You're in a hotel for Shabbos, and there's a chainik. There's a water chainik there. Are you allowed to use? Can you take hot water from there? That's the sort of situation we're talking about. So with our kalim, so the shaila is built in. Do they wash it? You stop at a rest stop when you're driving, and you're allowed to use hot water from there. We're going to talk today. Hopefully, we'll get to it. There's a lot of practical application to these dinim, but this is still from last week, so I don't want to run short on today's share. So I will cover as much as possible the practical applications, but I do want to finish the chemer. Otherwise, we're just going to get hopelessly behind. But in Mirz Hashem, we will get today to talking about taking hot water, tea from on an airplane or on a rest stop or things like this. I'm briefly going to go through in the example that this was made by Rabbi Havlin, Eretz Yisrael, Rabbi Havlin Jr. Can you use a stovetop for both Bosor and cholav? Do you need separate elements according to this shach? Because according to shach, let's talk now about a gas element. Let's not talk about electric for a second. Certainly, we're not going to talk about a glass top stove. It doesn't apply to that. To glass top stoves, for many reasons, this doesn't apply. Included in the reason it also contains cheres. These compounds are not really glass. They're composed with cheres. So to induction type stovetops, also this wouldn't apply to. But let's talk about a gas flame stovetop. So b'chal in lashon halacha they're called a chatzuva. A chatzuva they would put inside the oven, and it would dreifus balaz with 3 feet. Dreifus, yeah, it has 3 feet. The trivet, you put the pot on top, so it shouldn't be sitting in the coals itself. And the shaila is, how do you have to kasher it? So the Alter Rebbe says you need. The Alter Rebbe is talking over there in Hilchos Pesach. The Alter Rebbe says you need libun gomer. The fact is, he doesn't say the word libun gomer. You have to figure out that it means libun gomer from the context, the way he quotes the Ramah, the way he quotes the Nesekalim. The Rebbe Rashab has a kitzer Hilchos Pesach that he made a kitzer Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch, and there he spells it out. When Alter Rebbe said libun, he means libun gomer, which means turning things red hot. Mishnah Brura holds that all you need is libun kal. And you have a Ramesha Feinstein holds b'chal lechatchila. We're not worried about keeping separate burners. Why is that? So let's say this is blue, so this is a milchige burner. Okay, so it's hot and sitting on this trivet. So as you see, it's overflowing. Let's say it wouldn't be overflowing. So then we have the law of shtei kedera shenoga zu b'zu. We're going to see later on in Hilchos Bosor b'cholav that if you have 2 kalim that touch each other, one is milchik, one is fleishik, and the point of contact is dry and clean, there's no food on it and there's no moisture on it, so then b'diavad, everything is fine. Whether that's b'diavad, whether l'chatchila, and is it the inside of the keli or the outside of the keli. We'll see that we'll see there's tzamach tzadik piskedinim about it. We'll see later on. But certainly we have this law of shtei kederes. that allows b'diavad, certainly everything is okay. And that's the yesod for double wrapping food. That's what goes on when you get a airline meal. How is it that they're heating up your meal in the airline oven? That's the law Shtei Kedeus. We're going to get to that later on, speak Baruch. But therefore, Rav Moshe says, what are you worried about? You're worried that something spilled over? So if it spilled over, first of all, who says you have to worry about it spilling over? In Machazakin Surah, we don't assume that things happen. You do see that it gets dirty, you have to clean it. So is that called a chazaka that things spill over? Maybe, yeah. But he says, but if there's a fire, then maybe it's going to get burned right away. Rav Moshe is not worried about people keeping separate burners. B'chlal. Mishnah Berurah says you need a libun kal. What's a libun kal? If you preheat it and you heat it up to yatsa levis bay, so then that's hard to get kasher. The Alter Rebbe is worried not only that a liquid might overflow, but maybe a solid piece of something overflowed. He speaks about a piece of dough fell on, and then that's a solid piece that fell on, and then that leads to libun gomer, the Alter Rebbe says. Now over here, there's a case that could be made, and I'm saying lemaisa, one should keep separate burners. And there are other reasons why it is that that's a good idea. But as far as Ikar Adin, how can we apply the Shach to this case? Because first of all, we're talking about a kosher home, so it's always going to be Hatera Bala. So you're only going to need libun kal, you're not going to need libun gomer. Chametz we treat as Isser, even if it absorbed the taste in the time before Pesach, because it didn't have it kept its name. Oh, machlekes whether chametz is called Isura Bola, Hatera Bola, Alter Rebbe brings both days. You can be Mekel, but Mokan Hefsid. All different conditions Alter Rebbe brings over there in Siman Tov Nun Aleph. But Beker Adin, if when we're talking about Bosor B'cholav, and Alter Rebbe speaks over there about Bosor B'cholav, we call it Hatera Bola, you would only need a libun kal. So can we rely that if the burner is burning, when it overflowed, presumably the flame was on, so can we rely that it got kashered? So the truth is that according to the Shach, l'chura would be okay. Now, is that a reason not to keep separate burners? I don't think so. That it's just inviting a takala for things to happen. But when in people's minds, they look at the mix-up on a burner, they use the fleisha kapat on the milcha burner, or vice versa. This is a himmel gishrei, where if they use the milcha knife to cut an onion, that's okay. I mean, everything's cold. No. Whereas in halach, as we'll see later on in Siman Tzadik Vav, it's exactly the opposite. Much bigger problem. So it would come out according to the Shach that automatically these chatzuves, these grills, every time the eish is kashering them, especially since it's hatera bala, it's only kosher meat and kosher milk. So then you don't need libun gomer either. All you need is libun kal. B'shari surim in Pesach, when talking about chametz, then they need libun gomer. And libun gomer you don't have, even though there's fire there. The chatzuva doesn't turn red hot. If anybody's ever tried to kasher these grates, so you have to leave them 15-20 minutes, and they have to be sitting mamish directly in the fire. You have to turn them upside down. It's a big job making libun gomer, but libun kal, it's a tater ball, is not a problem. Now, if it's something which is made out of another material, induction, and so forth, so then you definitely mitzad ikar adin, you should, again, ikar adin, there is a Rav Moshe who's makel, but we're not naig like that, and one should keep separate burners.
Why is this more makel than shari surim?
Why is Bosor B'cholav more makel than shari surim?
Yeah.
The Sheirish Adin, it's a very interesting din. It's a Gemara. It speaks about karbonis. So when they would cook up, let's say they would cook up a korban teda. So the korban teda is nachol yom v'layla ad chatzos. Yeah, everybody understands what they're saying when they say zom kaman. Becomes very, very useful anytime you're learning. So the korban teda v'al nazir is maybe we'll talk about El Nazir today also. In any case, it's Nechol Yom V'Layla Ad Chatzos. Fine. What happens later? Okay, so Ad Chatzos is only from the Gezeda. When it comes the second day, if a person brought what's today's Wednesday? So Wednesday, person brought a korban teda. He's got to eat it by Chatzos, and it's a harchaka. But once it comes tomorrow, it's already Neisar. So it's Neisar. It's a Isser to eat it. What happened to the tam belu and the keli? What happened to the tam? There's taste of this korban teda that was cooked up in the pot. So the pot has tam iser in it now. But the din is that since it's hatera bala, that when it absorbed it, it was a heter. So therefore, you can do a libun kal. You don't need libun gomer. If it absorbed the isser, so if you took this nesar, for example, and you cooked it in another pot, so then it's a different story. The Gemara doesn't really talk about that, but let's say you take chazer in a pot, and you need libun gomer. Again, a pot, a frying pan would be a better example that you didn't put any liquid in, so then it's nivla al yadei eish, then you need libun gomer. But the din is, even if there was no water whatsoever, there was no liquid, if it was heter boli, absorb the heter, that's the din, that it does not leave the libun gomer, it's good enough libun kal. So therefore, the bosor that got absorbed there, since it's heter, you can kasher that with libun kal. This the Alter Rebbe says lagabe shvuos, so always kedai to learn over hilchas achag b'chag, when speaking about making something milchik for shavuos. Alter Rebbe speaks over there about how to kasher the oven in order to make. It doesn't go into whether it's better cheesecake or blintzes.
But if the difference between libun gomer and libun kal is how it was absorbed, how, like, what difference? This we're talking about.
The difference in libun gomer and libun kal is in general. If you're talking about the same category of isser, so if you're talking about chazer, so if it got absorbed, you do hagala or libun kal. If it got absorbed through liquid, if it got without any liquid and it was only al yadei eish, then you need libun gomer. But that's the way it got absorbed. But there's also a difference in terms whether it's hatera bola or isura bola. It's a gemara. Why it is? It's the derivation is from korbanis. It's a little bit beyond the scope of our shir over here, but the Alter Rebbe goes through it over there in Siman Tov Nun Aleph Hilchos Pesach, and has some very important implications for Bosor B'Cholev. The Alter Rebbe has a long Haggadah that I mentioned briefly before, but we'll get into it more barichas in later Simanim. Okay, so here, I guess this color is supposed to indicate that it's being, has libun. So here, the four cases. So at the very end, when the Ramah finished, the b'yevid ein lochush b'chol zeh, the last line, and even lechatchila, it's not the end of the world. It's a chumrah. What exactly is the problem, and what is exactly the solution? What is it he's worried about? What is it he's not worried about? So in each of these four cases, so what's the potential problem, and why is it not such a big problem? So the first case, when you say we already discussed that, why is it you're not allowed to? What are you worried about if you stir underneath the fire of the Kedera Shalevit Kachavim, because maybe there's Bosor B'Cholev inside. So that's why you're worried about it. Why you're not worried about it? Because why do you have to worry that there's something like that inside? And even if so, maybe that's a psikresha, but in L'Makon Shel Safek, okay, so we said that's not such a good heter. We bought from the Alter Rebbe's Kun Shazachron, we bought from the Rabbi Kiva Eger, that it's an Indian which is not really a suffix. It's a suffix that you don't know what's going on, so that's not such a good heter. But you have to assume that they're cooking Bosor B'Cholev. You don't have to make such an assumption. B'diavad with matter. Now, if you know there's Bosor B'Cholev inside, a different story. But if you know that there's Bosor B'Cholev inside, then you're not allowed to turn up you don't help them with their cooking. You're going to be able, but b'diavad, we don't worry about this if you don't know that there's a problem. That's case number one. Case number two. And again, the practical application that we have today is on the various dinim that comes to psikration. Okay, din number two, that mixing together the water from one to another to give to the behema. So the shaila is, again, we have a machlekes with the shach and the minchas yankiv. What b'chal this is talking about? Is it talking about cold water? Is it talking about hot water? Is it really also b'hana? So if it's really also b'hana, so we don't totally understand the shach, how it is you're allowed to do in the first place, but then we understand the reason for the chumrah. But pashtus, you have to learn that there was some other implication over here. Either he wants to be machmer according to those days that say, even when there's an issa d'rabbanan, if you remember the beginning of the simon, we have days that say that even though it's midrabbanan, you still, even kavush and malicha, that we said that if you pickled something for 24 hours, it's midrabbanan, there's no isser bishul, there's no isser anah. There is a bishul if you cook it later on. But just the salting or the soaking itself is not derech bishul. It's not usher, but there are days that it is usher. So maybe that's the reason why you have this chumrah. On the other hand, then we don't pass like that. So b'diavad is not a problem. What's with case number three? The chfifas harosh. What are you worried about? That maybe there is some time left over there, and maybe that tam was absorbed into the pot. And therefore, if you're going to cook water or something else in the pot, it's going to absorb the tam. Now, do you have to worry that that afer had basar b'chalav in it? And do you have to worry that that afer had basar b'chalav that was not totally consumed and turned into ash by the time it went into the pot? Do you have to worry about that? So, but again, ein lachush. And I'm going to point this out over here, and we're going to have it again in Sif Yud. But I want to point it out over here because this is maragle b'puma de inshim. Many people say that when they're using different, I mentioned before, the airlines, the water on the airlines, or the people that are taking the coffee from Starbucks and places like this, and they say, yeah, they're washing it, so there's a davar pogum, they're putting some water in the dishwasher, so therefore it's pogum. So okay, over here it's not meikar adin. Later on we'll have meikar adin. How important this din of pegima is and the limitations. It's not a heta that works in all cases by any stretch of the imagination. The fourth case is about the Tana Beis HaCheref, and sometimes it spritzes. Do you have to worry that it got spritzed on top? Okay, either we say that it didn't spritz, or we'll say that it got kasher right away, like the Shach said. But even with Shalcheres, do you have to worry? With the Cheres, it didn't get automatically kashered. Nevertheless, we don't need to worry about that. It's a chumra b'alma, and therefore I'm mekel lahifsid. Questions? Okay, so this was all left over from last week, and now we're getting to today's subject, which is basically involving cheese making. So we don't really expect that any of us are going to become expert cheesemakers, not even inexpert cheesemakers. But let's get on to it. So we're going to have three sifim over here, Tes, Yud, and Yud Aleph. And what I'm going to do first is to give an introduction to the little bit we need to understand some of the basics of the anatomy of a cow, very basic. Only if you're not basic anatomy of just the parts that concern us, and how it is the cheese that are made. And we're going to have three sefim, Tes, Yud, and Yud Aleph. So Tes is going to speak when we have a calf, a baby cow or goat or sheep, whatever it is, that's nursing from its mother. So we have two places you could find milk inside a kosher animal. It could be from the mother that it's inside the udder, and then the baby animal is nursing from the mother, and then it goes into the baby's mouth, into the digestive system, and ends up in the stomach. That's the second place it could be. So Sif Tes is going to speak about what is the halachic status of that milk that's in the stomach. Is it 100% still considered milk, or once it was swallowed already and partially digested, does it lose its status as milk? That's Sif Tes. Sif Yud is that since that stomach is used in cheese making, if somehow the stomach itself has the status of Bosor, so if somehow some of the taste of that Bosor of the stomach went into the milk, so now what happens to the status of the milk? When it went in through malicha, there was salt the stomach, or it was kavish, it was sitting there for 24 hours. No, they're not going to squeeze out the milk first thing. They shechted the animal. They have to prepare the meat. They have to do nikor. They have to do malicha. They have to cook it. And who says the first thing they're going to run into is to empty out the stomach to take the milk out because they want to make some cheese with the leftovers? So who says that's going to happen right away? It might sit there for 24 hours. Sit there for 24 hours, and there's some absorption of taste. We say it's not derech bishul, but if the taste went in, does that affect the status of that milk? That's if Yud, because you can use that Cholev nimtza bekeva, as it's called. The keva is the fourth stomach of the cow. That's what we're going to be speaking about. So cholev nimtza bekeva is useful to make cheese. It's called rennet. So the cholev nimtza bekeva is called rennet, and the keva itself, the word keva is used even in Poskim. In Gemara and Poskim, sometimes keva means the stomach itself, the actual organ of the animal, which is Bosor, and sometimes keva refers to the milk which is inside that organ, inside that stomach. So cow has four stomachs, and the fourth stomach is called the keva. So Sif Yud is talking about using that milk which was inside the keva. Sif Yud Aleph is speaking about taking the cave itself, taking some of that Bosor itself and using it to make cheese, which sounds like real Bosor b'chalav, but not necessary. So that's what we're going to be learning. And first, let's go through the general process. And here you have a happy cheesemaker who is pouring rennet, liquid rennet, into a pot of milk, and that's going to make cheese. So you need a very small amount of rennet to make a big pot. It's a chemical reaction. There's an enzyme which is in the stomach and in the milk which is in the stomach. That a small amount of it can cause the entire amount to curdle, and the wheys fall to the bottom, and then you have the curds and whey, as we learned about before when we were talking about mecholav and mecholav. And then it starts curdling. You got these little knives over here that keep slicing it to increase the surface area of the curds, so you should get more and more liquid out of it. So that's hamada b'chalav nimsa b'keva. Okay, so they decided this is, I've never actually seen industrially anybody using chalav nimsa b'keva. I don't even know if you could buy it, but today, but it speaks about Shulchan Aruch, so we'll say that for the picture, we'll say that he's pouring in the chalav nimsa b'keva, which is one way of making cheese. Then you could use it with the skin of the cave itself. So this is evidently a bunch of stomachs that were tied up, and that's hamada ba'ara keva atzma. That's going to be in Sif Yud Aleph, that you're using the skin itself. In fact, this is the way Dr. Tshuva brings down the case about how they first discovered cheese, whether first or not first, but people didn't have regular utensils for storing liquid. So if they wanted to store the milk, where would you put it? You have to put in we have water bottles, but they didn't have bottles like that in those days. And schlepper out glass was very difficult, or metal, whatever the case is. So whatever was lying around, you have a stomach, fill it up and tie up the ends, sew up the ends, put it inside. So somebody put milk and put it inside this keva, and then came back the next day and they had a solid block of cheese. And then it didn't spoil like the milk did. So this is a very great hamtzah until they figured out you don't need this whole stomach over here, this whole keva, in order to make that amount of cheese. You could use a little tiny bit, as we'll see further on. So those are the two different ways you can make cheese. Both of them are called called keva. If you want to be more specific, this is the ora keva. This is the actual skin of the keva. And then you could use the milk from the keva. Now, if you want to use the milk from the keva, so you slaughter the calf is the baby cow, and you want to make cheese. So by the way, by matnas kohuna, from the three things that you give the kain, one of the things you give him is the keva. Sometimes people ask, what in the world are you going to do with the stomach of what are you going to do with the stomach? You can't use it for too much. And one of the answers is that at least if it's a young animal, you can use it to make cheese, because that's the keva, the fourth stomach. So the question is, how long can it sit there? So we're worried about malicha, certainly, if you salted it, and we'll soon see why it is one would want to salt this keva. But even if it just sits there, we know kavish kemavushal. If something was sitting for 24 hours, so then it absorbs the taste. Normally, we say it absorbs the taste midiraisa. Now, when it comes to basa b'chalav, derech bishul, asra teira, we learned at the beginning of the siman. So they're not going to be isra hana, they're not going to be isra bishul, but nevertheless, the taste goes inside. Particularly, as the Nesa Kalim point out, that it has a chamitzus to it, that since we have these digestive enzymes within the stomach, so it has a certain sharpness. So when you have a davar charif, something which has, if it's really sharp, something like vinegar, lemon juice, something like this, so then it'll get absorbed in much less time. It doesn't need 24 hours to be absorbed, much less, as we'll soon discuss. Over here, it's got some chamitza, so the Ramah says, so therefore, lechatchila, take out the milk right away. You're busy, you want to do nikar or malicha, you want to get to make a barbecue with the calf you just slaughtered, take the milk out first, don't let it sit there lechatchila for any period of time. If it waited there, if it delayed there, so therefore, be'ikar adin, we say that until 24 hours, it's not going to have the din of kavush, although we are concerned, and therefore lechatchil, the Ramah says you shouldn't let it sit there. We'll soon see inside in the Ramah. What about the cave itself? So we differentiate between two different types of animals. A kosher animal, meaning not only kosher species, but it was shechted. Then again, the meat is hatera. And we're going to differentiate here too between heter and iser. And if you have an animal which is not kosher, either it wasn't shechted properly, so it was an avela, and the same thing would apply for a behema tmeya. So you do have in the industry, I've seen in factories, I've seen beef rennet and calf rennet and pig rennet. They do use pig rennet. So halachically speaking, they're in two completely different categories. And although today it's processed, they're not taking pieces of stomach and throwing it into the milk. It's somewhat processed, but it's batsum the same thing. And there's a huge difference halachically whether you're doing this process with something which is kosher or something which is not kosher. So here's a colored picture of the four stomachs of the cow. So the reticulum is the base of cases, the amasum is the hemsis, the rumen is the keres, and that's much bigger than this picture. It's on the side, but it covers a much larger area. And then you have the number 4 is the abamasum, which is the keva, and that's the one we're interested in. I forgot if I mentioned, but the abamasum is a very big issue today in kashrus with DA cows, displaced abamasum, that the way the dairy cows sometimes, as a result of the way that they're raised, this abamasum gets elevated and out of place, and the cow experiences great distress, and it doesn't give so much milk. So they do surgery on the cow, and in the process, they make a hole in any of the internal organs. The cow becomes treif, and all the milk becomes treif. And this is something which is a big issue in the dairy industry. Okay, so let's look at the flow chart, so to speak, when the cow or the calf eats. So it goes down the esophagus, okay, and it goes over here. So if it's, let's say it's grass, so it goes into the keres, okay, and if some of it gets digested, and then the cows, the reason the cow needs so many stomachs, we get by with one. Most animals get by with one. Why does it need 4? Because HaKadosh Baruch Hu didn't give it such a set of teeth. So we put already pre-chewed food into our stomach, so the stomach can do the job and finish it off. But the cow does not have the type of teeth that can really tear it apart in the same manner. So the keres puts its juices in and starts tearing it apart, and then it goes into the base of cases, the hemsis, and then it goes back and it chews it again. Have another picture of that. Yeah, this is a better picture. Okay, here you see the 4 stomachs, and gradually it ends up in the abamasum, which is the keva, which is the last one. By that point, it's basically liquefied, and it gets absorbed into the useful parts, get absorbed, become hardened, karush, and get absorbed into the system, all the nutrients, and then the rest of it goes out the back through the digestive system and comes out the end. This is just for informational purpose. This is what's going on the inside of a keva. Here's the inside of base of cases. Rashi says in Parshas Tetzaveh about the big dekuna, that it looks like a base of cases. So now you know what a base of cases looks like. So this has a better colored diagram over here. You see the cow is eating the grass. So normally the grass goes through over here, okay, and then it comes into the base of cases, and comes into the base of cases, and then it goes back, gets chewed some more, goes back, and gradually as it gets liquefied, so then it will go into the hemsis, and from the hemsis it'll go into the keva. And once in the keva, then it'll go into the intestines and go out the back. Now this is what happens when it eats grass. Agav, from the niflois of beta, a nursing calf, this doesn't happen, so it doesn't go. There's a valve that shuts off that it shouldn't go into the keres. So therefore, it takes a more streamlined digestive route to get quicker to the keva with less of these digestive enzymes, since it's not necessary, since this is the natural food that the cow is meant to have. So this is the keva. This is the part we're interested in. Okay, so here you have, they imposed a picture. So this part on the bottom here, this is the base of cases. It's like roundish over there, and the keres is much bigger than that. In any case, the keva was over here on the bottom. Okay, so chol nimsa b'keva, there could be 2 different ways of having it. So there's the chol of this solul, which is liquid, and then there's karosh, which is solid. So I have actually what I think is a more accurate portrayal. It's actually make things quite clear to me. This is like a very short video, but I'm going to try to stop it to show you what's going on. This is from some, I guess the equivalent of a barbecue in China, where they're serving tripe. Tripe is all of the inside kishkis from the animal they sell. So what you see on this chopping block is a abamasa. This is a keva. And they're going to take it. He's going to make soup out of it. I mean, the whole thing is ekeldik, but it's not going to go through the whole thing. But see what it means to scrape the inside of a keva. What does that look like? Now, this bapashtis was not a calf, so it's not just milk inside there. It was part of the other food that was being digested. But this is how I personally, when I learned this before actually seeing what it looked like, imagined what was going on here about the tzolul, the liquid, and the karush. So here you see the guys are going to cut it in half. Okay, and then he's going to scrape the food from the inside. Okay, so that was like cleaning. That's like cleaning it. So that's like junk, which is inside of it. And okay, I'm having a little problem with this video here, but then he's going to take the meaty part. Maybe I'll just go through it like this. So he's cutting it open, and then he's going to scrape off the non-food part, and then he's going to give the people the delicious tripe, and they're going to eat the rest of the abamasa. Fine. Now what I have over here after that, and we'll go through it like this. It'll be easier. It's not a video, but we'll see better. Okay, this is a lady from Mitzrayim who is teaching other like-minded people how to make cheese. And this is a keva, and she's squeezing out the liquid from the keva. So what's coming out? What's coming out, you'll see, is both liquid and solid. So she's squeezing it out like you empty out a toothpaste tube, more or less, and squeezing it out into a strainer. So in the strainer, you'll soon see the picture. You have this. So this is a mixture of tzolul and karush. So you see the solid pieces which are inside, and then you see there's a bunch of liquid here also. Now, what's best to use is the karush. The solid part is much better at doing the job. So she's going to rinse it out with liquid and get rid of the liquid part because she wants to store away the karush. So this stuff is the keva. So she's pouring liquid through here, and you see she's left with a bunch of curds. And here you see she's left with curds. She washed away the liquid, and this is just the karush. So this is what it looks like here. She's putting it on a plate, and then to preserve it, then she's going to put salt on it, and then put it away in the fridge, and then she's going to use it. So this is the chalav hanimtza bekeva. Okay, and this is the karush. In this particular case, she did not use the tzolul. She washed away the tzolul, and she's keeping the karush. Now, what about the keva itself? So here we have some guy with, I guess, an Australian accent, I don't know, is describing how it is to make keva for cheese. Okay, I didn't want to see it. We saw this already.
Fifth step is to cut the dried abomasum into pieces and pack it into a jar with salt. These dried pieces...
Okay, I don't know why I can't pause my video, but you see the guy over here is, he took the keva, he emptied it out and cleaned it, and then he dried it. He hung it out to dry. And now that it's totally dry, he's cutting it into little pieces, and he's going to take these slices and he's going to store them in this jar of salt. And every time he wants, he's going to take out another piece and he's going to make cheese out of it. So each one of those little pieces, it is enough to make a whole batch of cheese. I'll see if I can show this from the beginning. If not, the whole thing takes 28 seconds. Here we go.
Fifth step is to cut the dried abomasum into pieces and pack it into a jar with salt. These dried pieces of calf abomasum contain enough rennet to make many batches of cheese.
Okay, so that's basically the idea. So that's actually the keva. So here you can see the tzolul of the karush together. And here is just the karush, only the karush. And with this, it'll be easier for us to understand what the Shulchan Aruch is talking about. So any questions about cheese making?
So with the calf itself, they would shech the calf at a young age just in order to get the chalav and nimtza b'keva?
I'm not sure. I doubt it. I'm probably shechting it for another reason. We're shechting it to eat. Why
And
they
why
didn't let
that-
it? Why they didn't let it grow till it was older? Maybe they were hungry. I'm not sure.
I mean, if what activates the cheese making is the enzymes that the chalav gets from the keva, so why dafka the chalav animsa bekeva? Why wouldn't it be any liquid that's in the keva, and not dafka a calf? It could be, as you said, as you showed in the end of the video. What it really comes from is from the enzymes that's in the keva. It's just more better quality when it's chalav.
Well, it seems that the tzalul also has the ability to do it. It will do it slower, but there are it's more intense with the keva. But why one would want to use the chalav and imtza bekeva is for Yidden. It's less of a problem of Bosor b'chalav, that's for sure, as we'll soon see.
Right.
Okay, so let's go on. But what's the din? Sif tes. What's the din of the chalav itself? So, so the chalav itself, it's been swallowed. It has some digestive juices. What is the status of this milk? Is it still considered to be milk? No discussion in poskim. Person has a half a zayis of matzah. All they have a half a zayis. There's a discussion in poskim. Can he eat the half zayis matzah, cause himself to brech it up, and then eat it again, and then have a zayis matzah? Hanas garden he had is he eats it in such a way. There's a discussion. You have a child, the children, they brech up. So the child had some milk, and they breched up into a pot of meat. Poskim actually speak about that. Once it gets digested, does it lose its status of food? Does it not lose its status of food? Okay, so let's say you took it out right away. If you took right away, so it's milk. It's milk. Gendik there's no shaila whatsoever. It's milk with milk. There's no bosor b'chalav over there. The fact that it got swallowed by a cow, by an animal, so that means it's part of the animal. So there's all discussion in the Gemara about it. So it's not so pashut, but for Allah we say it's pashut that the milk kept its previous identity. Okay, that's what we said. Are you allowed to cook meat into it? It ends up being a very interesting machlekes poskim. Why is it a machlekes poskim? If it's milk, why shouldn't the world should be allowed to have it with meat? And this is based on a Gemara. And we're soon going to see the Gemara. So that's as far as the milk itself. There's an argument to be made that the milk itself has lost its b'chalit status of food. And it's not even considered to be milk anymore because it's already inside the cow and it has the digestive juices. It's pir shel alma, this milk. And maybe you can even cook bosor with it. We'll soon see. But then that's the diun is on the milk itself. That's sif tes. Now what happens in machalav shabbat techakeva that it was sitting inside for a while and it's kavush, or if it was maluach, that's going to be sif yud. So then it already absorbed the taste either through kavush or through malicha. It absorbed the taste of the ora keva itself. So the actual stomach itself, the tam basa, went into the chalav, and therefore you're not allowed to use it. It's bosor b'chalav. So you can't use it. This type of chalav you can't use to do gvina with it. B'diavad, the din is it's different. The b'diavad, we're going to say it depends which kind of milk it is. Is it a karush? Is it solo? We're going to have a discussion about this. And this is going to also help us with the din about what's with the pegima and all of these places with the soap, as I mentioned, with the dishwashing and so on. You can see it very clearly from this din, how much of a pegima is necessary and when it helps and when it doesn't help. But that's going to be the diu, and that's going to be the discussion over there in Sif Yud. And then in Sif Yud Aleph, we're going to be speaking about using the skin itself. So this is something which unfortunately did not come out properly on the screen. Okay, so we'll just go to the next page. This is the important line. There's a discussion in the Gemara over here about what is the din of the chalav and imtza bekeva. So we have at the end of the page, that's what I really wanted to show you in the page of the Gemara. It's chum kufta zayin. So we have a parenthesis over here. Okay, and this parenthesis is the source of a few days in Shulchan Aruch, come from this line of Gemara, because it's in parentheses, and both the Rif and the Rambam say that it belongs here, this line, and we paskin like this parentheses, and the Rashi is not gated it, and therefore he doesn't pay any attention to it. So bekevas ksheira sheyonkem min atreifa. So let's say you have a kosher animal and it was nursing from a treifa animal. It had a mother with 3 legs. You can see right away it's a treifa. So the chalav came out as a treifa. So the baby, which is a regular kosher calf, was nursing from its mother, and it's got a keva which is full of treifa milk. What's the status of that milk? L'chura, it's chalav treifa. So l'chura, it should be treif, that milk. If it has the status of milk, it's going to be treif. Then he said, "V'kolshken bekevas treifa sheyonkem min aksheira." Let's say if it's a treifa calf, the calf has 3 legs, okay, and the mother was fine. So what's the milk which is inside the stomach of the calf? The calf is the treifa. Yeah, but the milk that's inside came from a kosher mother. It's kosher milk. So that's no problem. That's no problem. You can use both of them. But what's the reason? The parentheses give. This is right at the bottom of the Amud. My time, chalava makunas ba pirshabalmo. Pirshabam is like garbage, like tsoya. It's like garbage. It lost its status b'chal as food. It's not milk at all b'chal. So therefore, the fact that it was a ksheirish yonkem in a treifa, and the milk that it was drinking was from a treifa cow, and therefore was treifa milk. So how are you allowed to use that milk just because it's inside the keva? But because it's already in the digestive system, pirshabalmo. And it doesn't matter whether it's sold, doesn't matter whether it's kadosh. Once it's inside the keva, it's pirsha ba'al, and this is the way the Rif and the Rambam and the Machaber paskin. We're not worried about cholav nimtza b'keva because it's pirsha ba'al. But according to Rashi, who is not gatus, we have a problem. Why do we have a problem? Because we have another Gemara. We have a Gemara in Daf Kuftes Amid Beis. We have a Braisa. Keva shebishla b'cholav. Let's say you have this keva, and you cooked it together with the milk inside, so the Braisa said it's zaser. The plat thickens. So the keva, the stomach itself is bosor. The milk inside, what is it? If it's spiritual ba'alma, why should it be aser? You cooked it with garbage, okay, so it won't taste good. But why should it be aser? It looks like from this that it's milk. Now over here, this is the Gemara that we just saw the copy of Hilchas Amadim B'chol Kevis Navela B'Kevis Shchitas Akum, that even if the animal was an avela that was nursing from a kshera, it's not important. The main thing is the green part. B'Kevis Kshera Shangam Yatreifa. Kolshkem B'Kevis Treif Shangam Kshera. My time, why is it good? Chol B'Makonas B'Pirsh B'Almo. So that's what the Gemara we just learned. So from this we see that once it's inside the keva, this milk is garnished. It's garnished Pirsh B'Almo. So how do you fit together? These are two direct opposites. The cholav nimsa b'kev, according to this, nechshav kecholav, and that's why when you cook the stomach together with the milk inside, it's aser because basar b'cholav. That means that the milk inside the cave is cholav. But from this, cholav nimsa b'kev ain't nechshav kecholav. So what's going on? So I'll give you the outline. Okay, so the Rambam and the Rif in the first day in Shulchan Aruch hold like the second one, that this says hilchasa. And this is the halacha, and I'll have to be matar. It's the Gemara on Daf Kuftes. Not to go into it now. They'll find another beer for that Gemara over there on Daf Kuftes. And really, the cholav which is inside, it lost the status of cholav. Rashi, on the other hand, is not gate as this. So therefore, he holds like it says in Daf Kuftes, and he holds that the cholav nims b'keva has din a cholav. And neither of those two opinions, they hold the opposite. But they do not differentiate between the different types of chalav. We've now learned that soul and this kodesh. One comes Rabbeinu Tam. Then you saw it back over here. It's actually on this page over here. So you see over here on the right, Rabbeinu Tam, the hani mila chalav soul shubatecha keva. The leichosh of pirsha. Rabbeinu Tam mikshalim, he paskins like both. You see over here, the taste was Hachi Garcin and Brave Svarim. The Hilchasa. Had this last piece is in most is in most Gemaras. So the Teisus says, so how does it fit with the Gemara before on Daf Kuftas? So Rabbeinu Tam says no problem. That Gemara which says it's milk is talking about the soul. So that's the way Rabbeinu Tam solves this stira. So the Rambam and the Rif, they take the parentheses and they say it's all Pirsha B'Alma and you don't have to worry about it's not milk anymore. Rashi takes the other side of the argument and he says that it's considered b'cholav and it's all considered to be cholav and he's not gatus b'cholav. Rabbeinu Tam mikshalim. So that's the Rif and the Rambam that the taka stira, but the halacha is like Daf Kuf Tezayin. Yeah, and it's Pirsha Ba'alma. And then the Rabbeinu Tam says it's not a stira. V'yeshchila b'chol tzol cholav kodesh. When do we say it's cholav? When it looks like cholav. It's cholav tzol. Looks like cholav. Has the din of cholav. And that's why keva, shabishal b'chalba. And the cholav that's inside is the tzolol. So therefore it's osir. Why does it say over there that in the Kufta Zayin that it's Pirsha Ba'alma? Because it already solidified. That's the way Rabbeinu Tam solves the stira. And the Rashi says it's not a stira, but he doesn't have no stira because he doesn't have it in his Gemara. Cholav akeva, din cholav ragel. If you find the cholav nimsa bekeva, it has the din of regular cholav, and therefore there's no the problem either way, and it has the status of cholav.
There shouldn't be a difference because one was cooked and this one was maimed.
Well, the shaila is lechatchila whether it's whether it has the status of cholav or doesn't have the status of cholav. If it's going to be cholav treifa, you're going to have a problem being maimed with it, because domer maimed lebotl, like we're soon going to learn.
Well, like I'm saying, it could be like a lower. It's not like it could be like a lower level of. It's not cholav enough to aser maimed, but it's enough to be aser.
You're bringing a good point. So those that hold that like Rashi, you're gonna have to find some way to be mataritz. That's one difference between them, and there are other differences also you could have between them. So let's learn now the Mechaber and the Ramah, and we'll see what the din is. So this is Siftes. So we'll learn Siftes, and then we'll take a break. Cholav nimsa bekeva. Ain't a cholav. Cholav nimsa bekeva. Mechaber paskins. It's not cholav. Umota lebashal bei Bosor. Apfilu b'tzol shaba. You can take the liquidy milk from inside the keva and you can make a Bosor with it. Not a problem. Because that's what the parentheses said, and the Rif Rambam paskin like that. The yesh misha there's somebody that answers. But what are the answers? As an Asa Kalim point out, you know, the Shulchan Aruch, as we said in our introduction, is just a kiss of the Beis Yosef. The Beis Yosef was relying on people to learn what he said in Beis Yosef. So Beis Yosef is not passing like Rashi at all. He's just discussing whether we're passing like the Rif Rambam or we're passing like Rabbeinu Tam. Rashi doesn't make it into the discussion over there. The Yesh Misha Eser is Rabbeinu Tam who answers the tzol. So it's really going, I feel tzol shabbat. But Yesh Misha Eser is going on the tzol. So the one Rabbeinu Tam answers the tzol, so he allows the korush. With that he agrees with the Rif and the Rambam, and he would allow korush. And as the Nesa can point out, even lachatchila you can cook with the korush. You bring down the Ramah says in Teres Chatas that even lachatchila you can do it if it's korush, but if it's tzolol, then he's going to answer it because the tzol has the status of milk. And this machlekes is going to follow us through the whole rest of till the end of the siman, because we're going to always be differentiating between the different days. So it's worthwhile reviewing that and getting clear in your head these 3 days about the difference in tzol and korush. And the Ramah adds v'kein negin, and that's the minig, is that we do like Rabbeinu Tam. So the Shach says, okay, we're going to answer the tzol like Rabbeinu Tam, and we're going to matter the korush. And the Ramah has no problem. You cook l'chatchila with the korush. And here the Shach says, wait, what happened? The Ramah was very upset about marasayin, yeah. So he says the korush also should be marasayin. Still looks like milk. So therefore, l'maisa, he's not going to allow you l'chatchila. Shach's not going to allow you to cook the meat even with the korush. According to the Ramah, we have in here of marasayin. In addition, the marshal paskins like Rashi.
But the Shach is not concerned about.
One second. Let me just finish the Shach and Taz. I'll take a couple of questions. Let's just finish this and to take some questions. So the marshal paskins like Rashi. He holds that the ikar is like Rashi. Okay, and the Taz, and now that you saw the difference between them, the Taz quotes this marshal too. Both of them quote the marshal. So the Taz says, "I feel makil karaben tan lachal ben korush l'tzol yesh lahachmem misovik man achshul b'korush." So really, the Taz is also paskin like the marshal. You look at the marshal inside. The marshal says 2 things. One thing the marshal says is that we paskin like Rashi, the ikar like Rashi. Another thing the marshal said that even if not, you have a practical problem over here. How do you draw the line between the tzol and the korush? There's a continuum between tzol and korush. So unless you rinse it out like that lady in the video did, and you clearly get rid of anything that has any shaykhs to solul, but even then, says the mashal, that this kadosh ends up being gradually more and more concentrated as it gets continually digested. So at what point, and we're going to see this later on when we talk about drying out the keva, at what point does it become so totally dry that it becomes like a piece of wood? The Ramah is going to talk about things being dried to later like a piece of wood. Very negay Allah, the whole gelatin conversation with carmine, different things in modern food processing, that lipase, different things where it becomes very negay. But at what point do we say how dry is dry? Ad mosai. So therefore, it's a very practical shaila. Even if we wouldn't paskin like Rashi, we're paskin like Rabbeinu time, we're going to differentiate between the tzol and the kaddish. So what are you going to do? You're going to come out and you're going to take, like you dry the marb for kerech, and you're going to take every piece of kaddish and you're going to dry it out to make sure that it has no tzol on it. It's not practical, says the Marshal. So that's the bottom line, is that the Rambam and the Rib Paskin, it's mutal levashlim mecholav, and that's also, and the Rabbeinu Tam. This is just a review, differentiate. The tzol is tak aser, but the kaddish is mutter, and the Rashi says it's aser. So the Shulchan Aruch Paskin is like the Rambam and the Rif. The Ramah says kein negin like Rabbeinu Tam, and the Shachan Taz, it looks like they're quoting the Marshal, not just to give you useful information, they're quoting the Marshal la halacha that the person should be machmer like Rashi. Questions? Sorry, I cut you off before. Somebody had a question?
Is there a practical difference? Sorry, go ahead.
You're saying is a practical difference
And
between
if you learn it like the Shach or the Taz or the Maharshal.
Yeah, is it going to be able to become Bosor B'cholav or not? It's going to become relevant in the next sifim. In the next sifim, if a person used that, let's say it absorbed the taste, if it absorbed the taste of the meat, so is that going to answer it with the Evid? It's going to be very relevant to sifyut. We're going to differentiate between the depending whether it was kaddish or tzol is going to depend whether it's going to determine whether cheese is kosher or not.
No, I'm saying that L'Poil, everyone holds that it's Asr L'Chatchila. The Shach and the Taz.
No.
Even with Tzolol, even with Karosh.
The Mechaber Ramah say it's okay. It's just the Mechaber says it's either one. You're saying Shach and Taz.
The Shach and Taz and the Marshal. And
should I say L'Chatchila or not? The Shai will be b'diavad. It will be b'diavad. I mean, according to even according to the Ramah, Tzol has a din of chalav mamish. It's going to answer even b'diavad the Tzol. It's milk. You have a Bosor B'cholav problem. Okay, so this is the yesod for the next two sifim. You have to get this straight, and then you can go and to see the application. We didn't make any cheese yet. We just have a dead calf, with some milk in its stomach. So we did a little wash up to clean it up, but that's all we have over here. Okay, we're going to take a 10-minute break.
Is this only about Bishul?
This sif is what's the status of the milk? The way it expresses it, that it's ad kedei kach, you can even cook meat with it. Okay, but the essence of the sif is to determine what is the status. Is this stuff milchik or not? Because if it's not milchik, it can't become Bosor B'cholav.
The Mara sign that the Shach is talking about, I'm assuming is not about Bishul, does it?
No, that's talking about Bishul. Yeah.
So what's the Mara sign? According to the Shach, there's no Mara sign by Bishul.
You're saying it. Yeah. So the Marasayan, what would be the Marasayan? I guess to eat it together in the person wanted to cook together and eat it, I guess. Yeah. Okay, so we're going to take a 10-minute break. So it's now 8:15. So 8:25 minutes Hashem, we shall return. Okay, gentlemen, we have an hour and 5 minutes left. And there's just like really a lot to cover. But actually I planned it, but I just realized there's just going to be a lot of concepts. This we did already. And I would sort of recommend, if you're interested, to go back and listen Just on the comment that was brought before, I'm not sure I got, but the Marasayan, yeah, definitely the Shach doesn't hold the bishul, but you look at Lashon Shach, he doesn't mention bishul over there, so it's Marasayan to eat them together, like the Shach holds in any other case. But we have a number of general principles, and it's tied in with dinim you need to know in Hilchas Malicha. It's tied in with dinim you need to know from Hilchas Taruvas. There's an inyan of davar amaymed loy bottle, which is a very basic, important concept, which has a number of exceptions. Davar amaymed in this case is the rennet, which is turning the milk into cheese. It's a classic example of a davar amaymed. Another example, if you put sourdough to turn a dough into something different. Whole discussion whether different types of shmorim to make mead and different sorts of alcoholic drinks. Well, that's a davar amaymed. Different cases of davar amaymed, but it's a very important inyan in halacha, and this is where it comes from. And we have a couple of major exclusions when it is the davar amaymed does not apply, and we'll be discussing that too. We also have a very general inyan which is discussed in Hilchas Taruvas in Siman Tzadik Tes, which is ein mavat l'nisa l'chatchila. And when you're throwing the rennet into the milk, and we have something fleshik, that even if it's a small amount, so we're going to say it'd be less than shishim, so we don't have isa basa b'chalav, and we're going to say find some way that it's not going to be called the davar amaymed, even though we're going to use the arakeva. But how are we going to get around mavat l'nisa l'chatchila? Does that apply? Does it not apply? And all of that is going to be in the next hour or so. Okay, so we have the Das Rabbeinu Tam. This is the Psaka of the Ramah. And before we go on to do Sif Tes inside, there's part of Sif Tes in the Ramah. Before we do the Mechaber, excuse me, in Sif Yud, the continuation of Sif Tes is really in the Ramah and Sif Yud. Because the Ramah, as you remember, and it's right in front of you on the screen, paskins like Rabbeinu Tam, and the milk, Chalav Nimtza B'Keva, is it called milk? Is it not called milk? So the answer is it depends. Paskins like Rabbeinu Tam, that if it's solo, then it's considered milk, and you're not allowed to cook meat with it. It's milchik. And if it's karosh, then it's mutter, even l'chatchila. So the tzol is going to be also even b'diavad, and the karosh is being mutter even l'chatchila. Okay, the Shach and Das don't agree, but that's what the Ramah holds. So I understand the Shulchan Aruch and the Ramah. We need to keep this in mind as we go further. Now the Ramah adds one important nakuda, which is very relevant to real life, and that is after you slaughtered this calf. So the Ramah said you should take out the milk right away. Let's say you didn't take out the milk right away. Okay, it's sitting there for a while. What happens to that cave, the Chalav Nimtza B'Keva? So the chemical process that it started with continues. So we have some tzolul which became karosh after the animal was already shechted.
Rabbi Berel, are you recording?
I think so. Yeah. Yes. So although the process is continuing because the environment inside the keva is still chemically conducive, but nevertheless, it's not actively secreting as it was in its lifetime, where it's actively converting this soul into kadosh. So what's the status if it became kadosh only after the animal died? So that the Ramah talks about in Sif Yud, but it's a good idea that he put it right over here. Let's say when the animal was slaughtered, it was takatzol, and then later on it became nikrash. So do we judge it as solul? And according to the Ramah, it should be aser because it has the din of cholav, it's milchik. Or do we say no, but now it's kaddish, consider it kaddish? So it's a machlekes. So Ramah first says yesh le din solul, v'yesh makilim b'zeh. So there's Rishonim that say it has the din of solul. You talk about the way it was to begin with. And there are those that say, no, you can be mekel and consider it to be karush. And what's the final halachas? The Ramah paskin makom hefsid yesh lahakum. Makom hefsid, so l'chatchila you should be machmer and consider it to be solul. But if it's a makom hefsid, so then it's okay. Fine. So that was all from Sif Yud. 1 second. Yeah. Fine. A whole discussion over here on the Shach. I'm not going to go into it. Okay. So that's Sif Yud, but it's a continuation of Sif Test. Now we're going to Sif Yud, Cholov Shnimtza B'Keva. And what happens if it was salted or it was soaked? So, Lechatchila, we mentioned from the Ramah that you should take it out right away and don't run into the whole problem. That, as we said, it has a chamitzus to it, and if you have something which is davar chametz or davar charif, then it'll get absorbed in a faster period of time. It doesn't need 24 hours to be considered to be kavush. It'll happen less time. So although it's not mamish a davar charif, nevertheless it has chamitzus in it. You should take it out lechatchila right away. Okay, what happens if you didn't? You didn't take it right away. So if it was only a short period of time, then fine, you can still use it. It's milchik. It didn't absorb anything from the skin, from the bosor of the keva. I want to mention one thing over there. It's the lashon that is used is ora keva. We learned previously in Siv Zayin it was that or is only also midrabanan. It's not this type of air. The air that's talking about over there is the skin, which is the outside of the animal. This is an air. It's bosor. It has din a bosor. It calls it air, but it has a din a bosor. It has to be salted before you eat it, and so on. Take out the dam. Has regular din a bosor. So if it only sat there for a short period of time, it did not absorb the tam of bosor. Now let's say it absorbed tam bosor. How did that happen? Either it happened for kavish or through malicha. I'm going to take off the let's get the PowerPoint for a second. Just let's think about what's happening over here. According to the Mechaber, this milk is pirsha ba'alma. It's garbage. It's garbage. Now, if you put a tam of something good into garbage, so now what does it taste like? Does it have the ability to take that good taste, and put it over into something else? In this particular case, that the tam basar from the keva is going to go into the milk, which is pirsha ba'alma, and then you're going to throw it into a whole bunch of milk, and it's going to turn it into cheese. Is the tam basar going to make it from the keva through the pirsha ba'alma and into the milk to go into the cheese? Is that going to happen or not? So when you say pirsha ba'alma, I mean, it's like a dog made on the street, and they scoop it up with the plastic over there, and you're going to put tam basar in it. But pashtus, one would say that the Seichel HaPashut would say, if you're taking your pirsha ba'alma seriously over here, then whatever got absorbed in it is also pirsha ba'alma. Why shouldn't it be pirsha ba'alma? It got absorbed into the pirsha ba'alma. Think about this a second. Okay, this thing it's worse than pogum. It's pirsha ba'alma. It's garnish m'garnish. Do we have to worry about the tam basar that got absorbed into this pirsha ba'alma? That's the case of Sif Yud. That's nimlach or kavush. That as a result of being salted with the milk inside, or as a result of kavush, that you didn't take it out for 24 hours, so some of the tam basar went into the chalif. So, but according to the Mechaber, passing like the Rambam, the Rif, so it's pirsha ba'alma. It got absorbed. And even according to the Banatam, so if it's Kaddish, we should worry about that. So here's the din. Peladik din. Also lechatchila. We're worried that even though the tam meshubach went into, I'm not saying you have to go crazy to eat keva, but that's called tam meshubach. It's called basar. It has tam basar. It went into the pirsha ba'alma. Lechatchila, we say that the tam basar stays alive, and therefore you're not allowed to use it lechatchila to use it as rennet to make cheese. B'diavad was okay, pirsha ba'alma. The pirsha ba'alma of itself, whether tzol and kaddish according to the Mechaber, or only the kaddish according to the Ramah, It had the power to take it down, that to weaken the taste, and it's not going to have the power to aser the cheese later on, to make it a basar b'chalav problem. But lechatchila it's aser. And that's a very, to peladik din. But the reason I'm saying it, and the people mavartzach with the idea of a davar pogum being able to prevent the transfer of tam. So whether you to talk about the any of these places where you're relying that the kalim, even though they were washed together with treifa kalim, and now I just cooked water inside. Yeah, but it was washed together. It was washed. No, the davar pogum. But you're playing. You have water, which is a tam meshubach, and then you have some salt. It has to take away the water the tam meshubach from the chazer that was on the plate that got washed together with the hot water, chinik, whatever it is you're cooking over there. That the tam chazer didn't go into the pot of water. Why is that? Because you had water in between and there was some soap inside. So we say that's going to prevent. So b'diavad is one thing, but lechatchila, even if it's the thing with, even if the chazer went into the soap itself, lechatchila you don't do it. That's what it seems like from this din. Let's go further and see it inside. So what happened here? Yeah. So all of this is talking about lechatchila. You take it out before it has any chance to absorb. B'diavad, it was there only a short time, and it didn't absorb. Then you can still use a lechatchila. But let's say it absorbed. But if it was kavush and it was kavush k'mavushal, and therefore it was cooked, and therefore the chalav nimsa b'keva absorbed the tam basar, or nimlach b'keva was salted and meliach keraseach, and also the taste of the basar went into the chalav. So then what's the din? So then we say that it received the tam. The chalav shebekeva kivul tam akeva. The keva itself, the basar, that now that taste went into the chalav. So then what's the din? So the klal is going to be that if it's pirsha ba'alma, go back a second, not to confuse things. The din is going to be if it got absorbed into pirsha ba'alma, whether according to the mechaber are going to paskin differently, but it's all the same idea. They agree on the idea. They disagree because they paskin differently about what's pirsha ba'alma. But if it's pirsha ba'alma, so lechatchila, we're worried that the tam that got absorbed is still tam, and you can't use it anymore. B'diavad, if somebody made cheese with it, we'll say it became pogel. So lechatchila also lahamidim megavina. Once it absorbed the tam basar lechatchila, you can't use it to make cheese. How it is people make cheese with rennet, we're going to talk about here. We're talking about later on in Sif Yudal, we're going to be using the skin of the keva itself. Here it's just the tam that got absorbed into the milk. Shame. We'll get there. So lechatchila, you can't make with gvina because this absorbed tam basar. B'diavad in binin v'gvina tav machlekes. Now b'diavad, if it happened, so then it's going to depend on the machlekes mechaber ramah or shachan taz if you want to go further and do das Rashi. So if it's going to have the din of chalav, then it's aser even b'diavad. We have no reason, we have no way to prevent the tam basar from going into the gvina, because it got absorbed into, let's say, according to Rashi.
This whole chart is all Ramah, right?
1 second. Both the tzol, according to Rashi, both the tzol and the kaddish, everything has a din of milk. So therefore, if meat went into it, so then we have to worry about that the chalav nimsa b'keva is itself basar b'chalav. It's basar b'chalav midrabanan because it's not derech bishul, but it's still basar b'chalav. That's what we learned at the beginning of the simon. It's not midiraisa, no iser bishul, no iser hana, but it's still aser. It's also midrabanan. Okay, if it's going to be something which is pirsha ba'alma, then b'diavad we're going to allow it. Now, whether you have shishim, not have shishim, we're going to talk about soon. But this is just a general outline of the argument. So then, when we're going to apply it, what's the din? So it depends. So if it's karush, then it's mutar b'achila. Both the mechaber and the Ramah hold like that. Okay, what's going to be shachan taz? We'll soon see. Then what's going to be if it only became karush later? So that we learned in the Ramah that b'makam hefsid you'll treat it like karush. because the shayla, if it was tzol and it became nikrash, we consider tzol a nikrash, and that we just learned in the Ramah, it's a machlekes a poskim, and he paskins you can be making a mokum hefsek. Okay, so the chol shabageba kibul tamakeva. Now, if it's korush, because that both the Mechaber and Ramah agree. If it's tzol, so the Mechaber holds that it's okay, because the Mechaber holds like the Rambam and the Rif. Kitama keva absor shabachol nachlash kishnos and tabachol vakeva shup perish pselas. So even though the tam meshubach went into the milk, when the milk has the status of pir shaba'alma, like the parentheses in the Gemara, like the Mechaber paskin, but it nevertheless weakens the tam. So there's a whole arichas dibur in Shachan Taz and other achreinim that there's a line of Beis Yosef that he wants to compare it with. It looks like it's not barnat. Is he comparing it? What kind of not barnat? It doesn't look like not barnat. But since we didn't learn dogim shalom b'kaida yet, and we didn't learn not barnat, you can't really follow properly the discussion without that. So I'm not going to go into that right now. But since it has the din of a pir shaba'alma, so lechatchila you're not allowed to do it. But b'diavad, you're going to allow to eat it. But according to Ramah, this soul has the din of cholav, so therefore you need shishim against the cholav. So now this milk, this cholav nimtza bekeva, absorbed now tam bosor, so now it itself is bosor b'cholav, and therefore you're going to need shishim against that cholav is now a davar aser. It's also midrabanan, but it's going to aser a gvina if it's more than shishim. Now the shayla is going to be, since it's the davar ha'maimid, why is shishim going to help over here? So good, we're going to get there. We didn't get there yet. Why is it that we're not worried about a davar ha'maimid in this case? That the davar ha'maimid labatul, we're soon going to see. That's that we're going to have soon. There was a question. I just wanted to finish this thought. Question, please.
The first slide, the slide before this, that was all the Ramah, I'm assuming, or even the Mechaber holds the Chatchila, you shouldn't keep it there.
The Mechaber does not say you shouldn't keep it there. The Ramah says you shouldn't keep it there.
So is there a chumrah not to keep it there, or?
It's a very interesting question you're asking, because all of the Lashanis over here, Cholav shenemsa b'keva. Look at the Mechaber. Cholav nemsa b'keva. I'll skip the Ramah for a second. Shenimlach b'kevasa eisha amad b'yom echad. So it's a lashon b'diavad. It's a lashon b'diavad. When you go on to Sifyur Aleph, im himid gvina bar kevas ksheda. It's also lashon b'diavad. So I'm going to see. I hope we're going to get there. I have to move. Today I made up. We're finishing. If I have to do speed reading, we're going to get there. Mitzvah Hashem. I got to keep with the schedule. The schedule. Hey, look at the schedule. So we're going to see the Alter Rebbe about being mabatel a davar ha'maimid 3 times. It's also lashon shel b'diavad. I heard from Rav Zalman Shimon Alav Shalom. He said today all chol of Yisrael cheese is b'diavad because you're relying on bittul of davar ha'maimid. I'd be mabatel davar ha'maimid. We'll soon see. Because lashon Alter Rebbe, others say you're allowed to do l'chatchila, but lashon Alter Rebbe is lashon shel b'diavad. So why are you allowed to eat? We don't eat things which are b'diavad, but it's the only way to make it. So then the b'diavad is not it's not a b'diavad. You can't answer the food from everybody. But the Mechaber does not say that you cannot, that you have to take it out right away. Okay, let's go further. Now we're going to somewhat digress to fill in some missing pieces in the dinim of kavush and malich. So malicha, the dinim of malicha are mostly in hilchos malicha. You also have in Simukov Hey, you have
Can you go back?
We're going to have in Tzaddik Aleph also dinim of malicha and the kavush. You have more in hilchos taruvas, but we need to review a little bit what exactly is needed before malich becomes like roseach and kavush becomes like mavush. Question? Okay. Now, we have spoke about Elam Shana Nefesh that I would always speak about Sefer Yetzirah. So over here you have the time, which is the Shana, and I guess Elam is the Kamus, is the amount. So how much salt is necessary before it's Malich Karaseach? I mean, you take some salad and you put some salt on it. Is that enough salt to make it Malich Karaseach? And how long does it have to be? So we say, this is a whole big machlekes. You can learn about it more in Simon Tzaddik Aleph. but the amount kamus melech shel achsharas habasar. Normally, it's the amount that you need to kasher meat. So although the Ramah says elsewhere, not here, the Ramah says that we're not bucky, and that even so, when you salt meat to take the blood out, so you put a certain amount of salt. What about when you do tzli, if you roast meat to get the blood out? So then you put even less, you put less salt. But since we're not bucky in these things, the Ramah says we're machmer to consider it. There's the shiur that it says in the Gemara is ein nechel machmas malche, that you can't eat it, it's not edible because of the amount of salt. But the Ramah says we're not bucky. We're not bucky, so we have to treat that definition of what's going to make maliach karaseich, which is enough salt that it wouldn't normally be eaten like that, is since we're not bucky, even if it's only maliach l'tzli, we're still machmer. Okay. Now, do we have to be so machmer over here? Here we have deyes b'chal, this milk is pirsha ba'alma. How machmer do you have to be already? So that's one question. And then how long does it have to be? So the din is that it's ein nechel machmas malchem. We pass, and that's about the melichul kedera. It's called. You normally kasher that you should be able to cook it in a pot. Okay, but we're machmer because we're not bucky, so we're machmer on any melicha. And so too, the amount of time that it has to be, they should say in the milk, it's 18 minutes, 24 minutes, different day is how long it is. But since we're not bucky with that either, so therefore we're machmer, even if it was there for a short period of time. Okay, that's when it comes to other dinim. But over here, the long comes the shach, and he says, we don't have to be so machmer over here. Over here, we have days, the whole thing, this whole thing is pirsh v'amas, we can be mamir al ikra din. And so too, when it has kavush kemavushal, okay, so now we have a definition. It has to be in the liquid for 24 hours. And if it's a mashke charif, as we say 18 minutes, then it'll be also considered kavush kemavushal in a shorter period of time. I don't know if I'm going to get to mention it later on, but you have a Chassam Sefer, the Piskei Tshuva, very fascinating tshuva from the Chassam Sefer about a oni, so a Talmud Chacham oni who used to get his parnasa from cheese, and the Chassam Sefer is working very hard to find a heter for him to be able to make cheese with the keva. They should make some parnasa. So among the different eitzes he gave him is he should take the ora keva and put it in and take it out for 24 hours, that it shouldn't become kavush k'mevushal. Because once you take it out, then the clock starts counting again. So we have a chumrah in this dinim of malicha that if something is a dover, normally we say that if you salt two things together, it will only aser kedei klippa. So ima kol kachush, okay, which means that it was not fatty. Something is fatty, it will distribute the taste further in through the thing. So normally we say malicha asus kadei klippa. So if it's not davar shamen, it's only a davar kachush, it's dry. So then asus kadei klippa. But if it's shamen, so then it's going to answer the entire thing. So there's a whole question. Taz doesn't understand why it is that we're worried over here that the whole milk is going to come usher. If it's only through malicha, what exactly are you worried about over here? So the Taz wants to first say that maybe cholav is a davar shamen, and therefore it's also bakule, but then he brings other places. Not a davar shamen. The Taz ends up with a big tzarachian, and the Shach and the Kudas Kesef says it's no problem, and he explains a number of reasons why it is that it's not a problem. And in our case, it's going to be considered, even without being a davar shamen, it's going to answer the whole thing. So by kavush k'mavushal, b'chal, the whole thing becomes asur. It's not just kadei klippa. So when it's malich, it only asurs kadei klippa unless it's a davar shamen. Basically, the shach will give the main answer. The shach is that if you have a keli she'em menukav, when you salt meat, so you have to have holes in the bottom that the blood should run out. If you put it in a keli that doesn't have any holes in the bottom, and then you have the tzir, you have the blood, and it has a din of something hot because maliach karatzeich, and it's sitting over there. So then it doesn't answer only kadei klip. If it falls on it, something as a result of a melech, or they're just touching each other dry, then it answers kadei klippa. But if it's something which is sitting in tzir and keli she'em menukav, it answers the entire thing. So therefore, it's cholav shenimtza b'keva. The keva gets considered like a keli, and therefore if it was salted with the milk inside of it, it answers the whole thing. And that's all discussion among the Shach and Tas. Here you see in Mechaber and Sif Yud, Chalav Nimsa Bakeva. Here the Rama said, Lachatchila ein lanicha bakeva sheyitztan nachal b'techa keva. That the Rama adds. Al b'diavad in lachush. Ad shenimlach bakevasa she'amid be'yem echad. Yeah. So once it had malicha and it was makabel tam, so the Mechaber agrees that if it was either salted or it became kavush, and therefore this pirsha ba'alma, because remember now the Mechaber paskin is siftes, the chol of a nimtza bakeva is b'chal not milk. You can cook meat in it. It's not a problem. It's pirsha ba'alma. Okay, but nevertheless, if it received tam basar either through malicha or through kavush, ein lahamid bay. L'chatchila, you're not allowed to use it. Lahamid bay means to use it as rennet in order to make cheese. You're not allowed to. What's a din b'diavad? So the din b'diavad is going to be, if it's something which was pirsha ba'alma, it's going to be mutter. And if it's not, you're going to need the shishim against it. So v'im hamid bay, so what's b'diavad? So you shouldn't use it as rennet to make cheese. But if you did, what happened? Somebody did it. B'diavad, what's the din of the cheese? Imut solul. So if it's sol, so Ramah passes like a Rabbeinu Tam, and the sol he treats like regular milk. So therefore, Eiser Kola Gavinas Achi Shishim B'Cholef Shamid Neged Keva Asura. Unless you have Shishim, the whole thing has become Asur, because since the sol has did a milk and you did Malich or Kovish, and it Asur, now it's Bosor B'Cholef. Bosor B'Cholef Midrabanim. So Bishul Derech Bishul Asur Teira, but still Midrabanim it's Asur. So it's Cholev. It's like somebody cooked a piece of chicken in a pot of milk. It's Bosor B'Cholef Midrabanim. So this is kavush kemavushel midrabanan. Lecheresech midrabanan. So therefore, it's milk and meat, and therefore you need shishim. It's iser. It's iser b'asar b'chalav. You need shishim against it. V'im haya shishim b'chalav hakol mutter. As long as you had shishim in the milk, meaning the milk that's going to be turned into cheese, so then the whole thing's mutter b'diyah. V'im haya keva krusha. But if it was kaddish, then it's pirsha ba'alma. Einay said it's klum. Then it's not going to answer anything. I feel like shishim b'chalav neged hakeva, but that's Rabbeinu Tam. Okay, that's not from the Ramah. That's but that's clearly the makram, because the Ramah paskind. You can see, by the way, over there, the previous sif test. So the Ramah said yesh misay sha'isa. So I mentioned that you don't know whether that's Rabbeinu Tam or Rashi, unless you read the Beis Yosef. The truth is, you can see it from the Ramah over here. That also he's clearly passing like Rabbeinu Tam, because he's answering the tzolol and it's being matter the kodesh. So if it was kodesh,
and the Mechaber will hold the Ramah, the Gabe both.
Exactly.
And kodesh.
Exactly. But everything's okay. So he doesn't spell it out. He says ein lahamid ba. You shouldn't do it, but he doesn't spell it out. But it's going to be mutter. Yeah. We learned this already, but the L'Shem Inyan, we took it out of its context to put it together with Siftes. That's what we learned before. What's the definition? If it only turned Kodesh after the animal was shechted, what's its status? So therefore, we treat it like Sol, but Makam Hefsid, Yesh Lahakal, you can treat it like Kodesh, and it's okay. So far, so good. Questions? Okay, so now, final halacha over here. So the shaila is, this is the Taz shaila. I mentioned this already. So why does the Ramah say you need shishim for both kavush? But kavush, we understand why you need shishim. But why you need shishim in the case of malicha? Malicha, we know only asas kadei klippa. That's the Taz shaila. So the Taz wants to say maybe a chalav a davar shaman. But Taz not happy with the shaila because other places we see that chalav is not a davar shaman.
How do you measure kadei klippa with liquid if it's solid?
So that is one of the answers of the Shach. The Shach gives us a number of answers, and that's exactly very good. So the Shach says in the Kudas HaKesef that it's one of the reasons, and the Taz himself wrote it, that you can't take klippa from liquids. So therefore you have to ask the whole thing. Anyway, that's the Shach has a number of answers over there. So he says one of the main answer the Shach gives, which is 18 minutes. Once it's sitting over there, it's like a keli sheina menuchav. So it's sitting over there. So asks everything. It's not just malicha. It's considered to be like kovush. But that's another answer over there. It's a long Nekudas HaKesef And the Kuzak Hesef writes very, very sharp. Lo kasha midi mekama taimim, he writes on the task. Yeah. He's not worried about it. Okay. And now we move on to Sif Yud Aleph. So we made a siyam on Sif Yud, and now we do Sif Yud Aleph. Things become lebedik. And this now becomes the whole question. And so let me first let's get to the end of the story before we go through all the steps. Because there's some people, they like reading the end of the book first, so that at least they know where it's who killed him and whatever, they get to the end. So now I'll tell you who killed who, and you'll know exactly what happens at the end, and then we'll figure out how everybody got there. Okay. So is animal rennet used today? So the answer is yes. I've seen in many places in factories, they're still using animal rennet. In Europe, they use it even more than they do in North America, but animal rennet is still being used. How is it used? So they take they take the keva, they take the Bosor keva, they dry it out, and then they dissolve it in something, and usually use as liquid rennet. They don't want to use the powder. Maybe they take the powder and then liquefy it. Not sure exactly how they get in a liquid, but it comes in. It looks like a plastic bottle of bleach, and you pour it in. So that's the animal rennet. They do use it. Is there any kosher rennet being used? So there is kosher rennet being used. There is cheese. I don't know if there's any on the market right this moment, but there are hechshedim that make cheese with animal rennet, and they shecht the animals, and they use it. Now it's very rare. Most of it on the market is not being made. Almost everything on the market, the kosher cheese, is not being made with animal rennet, and especially chol yisrael cheese, you don't find it with animal rennet. But the dinim we're going to learn are still very neged to halacha. The most common case, I'll just give you one case. And if we had some more, I'm planning on running out of time already because I see how much we have to cover. But the idea of a davar ha'maimet. Now we're going to learn about a din of a davar ha'maimet. So one question of Arsach and Egen, Sif Yud, that the Ramah was talking about bittul b'shishim. But we're now going to learn in Sif Yud Aleph some klolim gedalim in Isva Heter. And the idea of a davar ha'maimet lay bottle, a fila balef lay bottle. So the classic example of that is putting rennet into cheese. And the rennet is bosor, and the milk is chalav. So how are you allowed to make cheese with animal rennet? So the simple answer to the question is you're not. The shayla is b'diavad, what's going to be the din, and the lashon mechaber is lachatchila. So the shayla is, how did the hachsherim get to this point where they found a heter to make cheese out of animal rennet? Okay, so there's a long Rabbi Kiva discuss about it. The Igris Mesha speaks about it. All the Paskim speak about it, and a lot of them, the Pshuta Shal Mikra is you're not allowed. And it's a din of b'diavad. Like I said before, that what Zalman Shimon told me, that if you have no other way to make it, it'd be one thing. Now you have microbial rennet, and it's easier to make. And you don't have this problem. We have other problems. We have cholavakim problems making cholav yisrael cheese. But that's a different story, and hopefully we'll get to that, at least to mention it later on also. So it's not, b'mitzias, it's not a big issue. But there are certain enzymes. Ultimately, rennet, the active catalyst, the active ingredient that's causing this reaction to take place, is an enzyme. There are other enzymes. There's an enzyme called lipase. So lipase, I know the sheikh that did it for many years in Argentina. He used to shecht goats, and he would take the tongue, the back of the tongue of the goat, with the tabas hagdela, which are those that you learn El Chashita. You learn Rambam, you also know what the tabas hagdela is. That right on the end of the kana. The kana is the windpipe, and it's got rings of cartilage going all the way up until you get the top one, which is closest to the exit, all the way at the top of the neck. Has mostly they're like in a U-shaped form, and the hard cartilage like this. Then you got a little thin piece on top. Then you get the tabas hagdela, which goes all the way around, and you take that, and it got evidently some glands over there, and you extract from these goats an enzyme called lipase, and it's added to cheese, and it's used today in the cheese industry, and it adds flavor. So that's very commonly used. they're running all over the world to shech these little goats and take out the tabas agdela. You know, it adds a certain taste to it. And the shaila here, you're taking an animal product. So whether this is maimed or whether it's not maimed, but what's the status of using an animal product? So even though animal rennet is not commonly used in cottage in kosher cheese today, but you have other animal products being used in kosher cheese today, and you have all different sorts of processing agents and enzymes which are used in various forms of food. So I have some of it a list at the end. We'll see if we can get through the Chemer, be able to go through and to talk about this whole inyan of davar maimed. It's a very big sugya and very, very applicable in the flavor industry and all the food industry, b'chlal. But the end of the line is that if you shecht the animal, and it's a kosher keva, so the din is we do not have a chumrah of a davar hamaimet, and that's going to be a lot of energy of the shach and other achreinim to explain why it is we don't say davar hamaimet afilu be'alf leibotel. So the din is if it would be nevela or a treifa or the be'ema tmeya, so then it's taki. You're not allowed to use that. Then we say it's davar hamaimet labotel. So what's the difference if it's kosher? It's not a davar hamaimet. Why is it bayabotel? The Ramah just said it's batel b'shishim. Why is it batel b'shishim? We're gonna have the cave itself is all gonna be batel b'shishim. Why? Of course, it should be davar hamaimet. So why? So that's the exercise, but it's not only negeya. So to actually figure out what's happening with the cheese, it's not so mukhrach, because there's other ways of making cheese today. But it's in many other foods you have it. Okay, so this is now Sif Yud Aleph. Lachatchila also lahamid gevina imor shel keva. Again, the ki ein mavatlin isur lachatchila. There's a din that even if it's going to be bottled in the end, you're not ein mavatlin isur lachatchila. Where did that come from? It's a whole discussion, but this belongs in Hilchos Tarubos. We're not learning that now. But we have a problem of ein mavatlan isur lachatchila, and in order to get this stuff, whether it's the lipase or the rennet, the animal rennet from the kosher animals, and being able to put it in, why it's not ein mavatlan isur lachatchila is a big stretch, and not everybody agrees with it. And the first address is the Rabbi Kiva Eger speaks about a parucha to try to find that if it's you put together. We're going to learn what happens if you dry it out. It'll become eitz ba'alma. Maybe it's not even a b'chala food anymore. Maybe it's not usher anymore if you dry it out enough. Okay, we'll soon see. So let's say you use the orshel keva, and you have the picture of these hanging stomachs over here, but you saw the guy that was putting those little dried up pieces into the jar is probably closer to the way it actually works. So what's the din? So the din is if it was erkevis nevela or treifa or behema, hagvina asura b'chol efer. It's asur. And why is that? So this is the very important principle of davar hamaimed afilu be'elef leibotel. The davar hamaimed is not botel. Now, that is the halacha. The halacha is like that. There are rishenim and achreinim that hold that this only applies to Veda Zara. The Gemara says we have the inyan of a davar hamaimed by gevina, but there are those that learn, and you look on Teisvis over there in the Veda Zara, that you have the chuln, that and you have the Shach quotes achreinim, the paskan like that says this whole idea of davar hamaimed. We don't paskan like that. So although we don't hold like those rishenim, and we'd say la halacha that a davar hamaimed leibotel. There's even a machlekes whether that's midderais or midderabanan. You have a kuntres hachar and hilchos pesach and tof mem beis. I think it's kuntres hachar and tes, if I'm not mistaken. The Alter Rebbe goes through the days of whether it's midderais or midderabanan and concludes midderabanan. But we definitely paskin it's aser. And here you see, but this applies kevis nevela. Why is it kevis nevela? So let's say one of the exceptions to the rule of davar hamaimed. So this is the klal of davar hamaimed. What kind of exclusions do we have from a davar hamaimed? So the two main exclusions we're going to discuss, there are other exclusions too, is there has to be an iser machmas atzmi. What's an iser machmas atzmi? That we contrast that with the iser balua. So let's say you have a piece of kosher meat. Yeah, you have let me say, figure out something where we have another maimed. Let's say we're going to be using some sort of yeast in order. You have a chametz stick of yeast, and you're using it to make a drink, some alcohol, and some beer or what a mead, whatever it is. You take some dates or something kosher Pesach, and you take a chametz stick of yeast and you use it. It's maimed, and it turns this juice into a beverage, into alcoholic beverage. Okay, whether that's davar maimed or not is also machlekes, but the Alpi din we hold it's Magen Avraham, Alter Rebbe quotes paskins like that. That's also davar maimed. Fine. So you had you made it with chametz, even if it was less than shishim davar maimed le bottle. So you answer the whole thing. But let's say the yeast was itself not chametzdik and it just absorbed the tam of chametz. Do we say davar maimed le bottle? So it's isra balua. If the isra is only absorbed in something else, then we don't say davar maimed le bottle. Only when the whole thing is mamish through and through asr, isra machmas atzmei, like nevela, so then we say davar maimed le bottle. But isra balua that it's asr because it absorbed the isra. So even though it might not be bottle b'shishim, I'm going to say chtichanas nevela, whatever the case is, but it's isra balua. So then normally we're not going to say this chumrah of davar maimed le bottle. Davar maimed le bottle has its own gedorim, and as we see, like I mentioned before, there are those of Bachal that there's no such thing. We don't paskin like them, but there are those that hold it only applies to Avodah Zarah, it doesn't apply to other things. Shame. So if it's not a iser machmas atzmei, there's no chumrah of davar maimed le bottle. Okay, so just to get clear, we have a bunch of principles going on here. Is part of it, but the ikar subject over here is davar maimed le bottle. That's what we're talking about over here. And therefore, if you use keva from nevela to make the cheese is treif. And when the Gemara in the Avodah Zarah is talking about the isra of Gevinas Akum, we have isra chalav akum, chalav akum vein Yisrael reyehu. That's isra chalav akum. We have isra Gevinas Akum. Why are we worried about Gevinas Akum? So there's a whole discussion, many reasons brought over there in the Gemara. They use shum and chazer, the kota service, all different sorts of reasons. But the reason which ends up taking the day is because sometimes they use kevus nevela. And since davar maimed le bottle, so therefore you have to be geyser, even if you know. That's why even if the goyish cheese, even if people not keeping chalav Yisrael and they know it's microbial rennet, and let's say they're not keeping chalav Yisrael, so you can't give a hechsher on it mitzad Gevinas Akum unless a yid puts in the rennet. It's a gezeres chachamim on Gevinas Akum. Okay, whole discussion exactly what you have to do to take away this for Gevinas Akum. But the reason that ends up being the final defining reason for the Isra Gevinas Akum is because maybe they're going to use Kevis Nevela and a Davar Maimed le bottle. Okay, but if they're below, we don't have that. Now the Shaila, where does Bosor B'chalav fall in? So we see Bosor B'chalav on the one hand, if you have a half zayis Bosor and a half zayis Chalav, you put them together, it also becomes like a Isra Machmas Atzmei. We say Chtichas Nas and Nevela, we'll see later on. Everybody says that by Bosor B'chalav. Anyway, that's one of the shach is machadish that the reason that we don't have this problem is because Bosor B'chalav is not considered to be a davar maimed. At least if it only came through malicha or kvisha. So there's a whole discussion. What's the main reasoning of the shach? Is he going to say all Bosor B'chalav is excluded, even if you somehow cook Bosor B'chalav together and then use it to be maimed something? I don't think it's going to make any cheese once you cook it, but if you use it to be maimed something else, is any Bosor B'chalav excluded from that? Do we say that it's a special din by davar maimed that Bosor B'chalav is not a ism tzaratzmei? Or do we need the additional factor that it was only through salting or kavush and therefore it was only midrabanan? Okay, that's whole discussion. The Shach brings both reasons over there, but that's why the bottom line is that b'di'evid, we do not have a problem of davar maimed by this case. Even the cave itself, on Bosor B'chalav, that I mentioned melicha kvisha, even if the keva was not salted, but when you're going to be putting it inside, you're not cooking it, so there's no nasinas tam. It's going to be less than shishim, so it's not nasin tam. It's a small amount. The keva is normally less than shishim, and it's not being cooked. So you would so Lamaisa, we have a Isra Davar Amaimed by Kavis Nevela, and we don't have it by a Ksheda. Why can't you do a Lechatchila? For a side problem, nothing to do whether it's Maimed or not. So therefore, Kavis Ksheda, Ima Keva, Lena Sanas Tam Begvina. If it's not nice and Tam, it's less than Shishim, then not Gvina Ksheda. But yeah, but it's going to be kosher. And that's the din, it's the Shiur Aleph. We differentiate between Kavis Nevela and Kavis Nesheva, and the Kavis Ksheda. Now, he quotes this din from Taruva saying Eich Beitkin Nesinas Tam. So this is supposed to be Simon Tzadik Ches, not Simon Kuf Aleph. Anyway, this is something which is just Bachal. It's necessary to understand the Lashon Mechaber, Lashon Shulchan Aruch. How do you know whether something is nice and tam or not? So according to the Mechaber, you can ask a goy. Normally, it's a goy Mesiach Lefi Tumah. He has to be discussing something else. He doesn't know you're relying on him. So that's Mechaber. No, listen, Techeter. Ashulasis Lagoy Litamas the Taruvas Lism Chaldavarav. You can rely on the goy. The Kfela Arma, the Gemara says you can rely on a Kfela Arma. The Ramah holds no. Achshav, those days are over. Ein Lisma Chaltimas goy. V'lochin Tomin Yesh Lashar Shishim B'Heter Negades. You always have to have shishim. That's the way we measure Nesinas Tam is shishim. According to the Mechaber, if you don't have a guy around to ask, I mean, you can't have a yid taste it because maybe it's usher. So you're gonna have to ask a guy. There's no goyim around, so therefore you rely on shishim. But the Ramah says anyway you have to rely on shishim. And although many cases we have in Minik Sfar they go after a Mechaber, and Ashkenazim go after Ramah. Kaf HaChaim says the Minik Sfardim is that today we don't rely on a guy either. So if the keva went into the milk over here, it doesn't exactly look like that when it goes inside. So how are you going to tell whether it's nice and tam or not? So you need shishim against the keva. And now let's learn the first part of the Mechaber over here.
This is all Midrabanan, right? Because there's no bishul happening over here.
Yeah, there are days, like I said, there are days that say Dover Amayim is Midiraisa, but the Alter Rebbe Paskins that's Midrabanan. Yeah. So this is the Mechaber I kept mentioning. Lagabe the Din B'Diavad. Mechaber says in Yud Aleph, Im Hamid Gvina Ber Kevus Kshera. So if you did it, and Yesh Batam Bosor Asura, Vim Lav Muteres. So if it has Tam Bosor, which is, again, according to us, and according to the Kaf HaChaim, even the Minigan Mechaber, that it means Shishim. So if there was Tam Bosor, there was more than Shishim of the Keva into the, I don't know what the cheese would look like. It's a lot of Keva. In any case, then it would be Asr, V'im Lav Muteres, but if it was less than Shishim, it's Muter. Okay, and we're not worried about a Davar HaMaimed. Aval HaMaimed bar Kevas Nevelu Treifu Behemoth Tmeima Eisa B'Cholshu. But if you used the keva of a non-kosher, either it was a kosher animal or it was an avela that was not shechted properly, or died without shechita, or treifa had a disease and it was treif, midiraisa, or behemoth tamei, which obviously also midiraisa. All of those three are aser mitzad the isser mitzad atzmei. Okay, and that we say, as the Ramah explains right away, Mishum the Davara Aser Ba'atzmei Umaymed Afilu Ba'elef Lebot. So that's the principle of a Davar HaMaimed. The Ramah says it clear, but it's only a Davar Aser Mitzad Atzmei. Okay, but if it's from Keva Kshera, so that's okay. We're going to soon see inside. We're going to discuss the long shach who goes through this whole parsha, and that's really dicker. I mean, all the Knesset can't speak about it, but the Shach nimmt darum the ganze Sugya, also zu sagen. Just say one nakuda is that when it comes to Bosor B'Chalav, if you Davar HaMaimed lay bottle, if you're starting off with a heter, there's no isser anyway. Where do we have Isser Bosor B'Chalav? Isser Bosor B'Chalav Mitzad Tam. It's Mitzad Tam. With starting off, it's a heter. When you have an Avela, you're starting off with an Isser. You're starting with Bosor. This keva is heter. The keva is heter. So when does it become Masur? When it's nice and tam. So since it's less than Shishim, it's not nice and tam. So that's the Nakuda. There's more to say about it, but just to keep that one fundamental difference in mind, why it is that the Bosor B'chalav is going to be different. We'll go through it soon. But now we have a whole other exclusion. I mentioned to you before that we're going to discuss two exclusions to the law of a Davar HaMaimed. So the first exclusion we're going to mention, the exclusion to Davar HaMaimed, is if it's Isser Balua and it's not Osam B'tzad Atzmei, then we don't say Davar HaMaimed Labatl, okay, as the Ramah just said over here. And there's a second exclusion which is called Zev Zageirim. Very, very important Allah. And that's what the Ramah says now. Zev Zageirim, Zev Zeh, who's the first Zeh, who's the second Zeh? I don't know who's first or second, but one of them is a Isser and one of them is a Heter. So when you have something which is being caused by two entities, and one of them is Asr and one of them is Mutter, let's say according to Rabbeinu Tam, let's say you took this whole mess and you used it from the Chol of Nimsa B'Keva and you threw it in the Tzol and the Kodesh together. So according to Rabbeinu Tam, the Kodesh is Mutter and the Tzol is Asr. Let's say you put it together, Tzol and Kodesh together. That's Zev Zageirim, because both of them are causing it to turn into cheese. And one of them is Asr, one of them is Mutter. If it's Zev Zageirim, it's not a problem. Again, whether that's Lechatchila B'diavad is a different story, but first learn the Ramah and also how much does each have to contribute to the total story. So first we'll read the Ramah. But Dafke Shlei Hoya Sham Maimed Acher Raka Asr, says the Ramah. The only time we're going to have the Isser Davar HaMaimed, we have another exclusion. It's only going to be prohibited, the product that results, if there was nothing else. If it was together with another Maimed, and that was Mutter, then it's going to be Zev Zageirim, Mutter and Mika Shishim Neged Isser. As long as the Shishim Neged Isser, we don't have the, you have to have Shishim against the Isser, otherwise it's nice and tam. It's not Potel B'chlal. But we're not going to have the Isser Davar HaMaimed if it's Zev Zageirim. Now we're going to give he has percentages down over here on the slide, but I'll say it outside better just to get it clear. There's a machlek about Zev Zageirim. So let's say we'll use an example of the tzol and the kodesh. So the tzol is aser, and we'll say that's and we'll say the kodesh is mutter. According to Rabbeinu Tam, according to Ramah, fine. And you use both of them together. So we're worried about the tzol. That's the iser. The shayla is like this: if there was no kodesh and it was just that amount of tzol, would it turn into cheese? Would it not turn into cheese? Okay. It looks like the Ramah doesn't care. It looks like the Ramah doesn't even care, even if the kodesh, the heter, is not contributing too much. As long as it's not doing it by itself, says the Ramah, it's still okay. We don't care whether the iser could do the whole job on its own or it can't do the job on its own. Okay, that's what it looks like from the Ramah. Both the Shach and Taz disagree. Both the Shach and Taz hold, and the Alter Rebbe passions like this also, that if the Isser could do the job by itself, so it's nice that the heter is helping along, but it's not really doing anything because the Isser could have done it by itself. We don't say Zev Zageirim in such a case. It's a machlekes. The Ramah hold it would still be good, but according to the Shach and Taz, they disagree with the Ramah and they put a condition that you have to make sure that the Isser would not be able to do the job on its own. If the Isser can do a job on its own, we don't have this heter of Zev Zageirim, and we say that since it was able to do the job on its own, in spite of the fact that something came along to help it out, make it faster, make it a little bit more, whatever the case, it would be a little harder cheese, not as hard cheese, but as long as it was capable of being maimed by itself, we lose this heter Zev Zageirim. We go back to the Iker Isser of Davar HaMaimed. So that's a Shach and Taz paskin like that. And the Alter Rebbe passes like this also. Hilchos Pesach. I do want to mention, and it's a b'chal very, very kedai, aside from going through the Shulchan Aruch and Shach and Taz and Rabbi Kiva Egan, Prima Gadim, and all the nice kelim, and of course the bichel. You have to go through the kavets from Avineni, but you have in Piskei Dinim from Tzemach Tzedek, you have certain simonim that he wrote al derech Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch, and we have these three sifim that we learned today, Tes, Yud, and Yud Aleph, and the end of Pei Zayin, you look in Piskei Dinim from the Tzemach Tzedek, Mamash Kafta V'Ferech, that he goes through all of the shitas and all of the dinim, and it looks like over there, by the din of Zev Zageirim, is more nated the Das Ramah. It's lapella, but that's what it looks like. But in any case, this is a din of Zev Zageirim, very, very applicable. So here we say each one by itself couldn't do it. Each one doing 50%. So here we have the kosher. I guess that's red, and it's nevela, it's black. Yeah, so in such a case, the Ramah holds that it's kosher, but the Shach and Taz hold that it's treif. Why is that? That since it could have done its job by itself, nevertheless, that in spite of the fact that the kosher helped it out, so it would have taken a little longer. But according to the Ramah, since there was something helping it out, it's kosher. But according to the Shach and Taz, it's treif. Now, if you could have made the whole thing with the kosher, so then we hold that it's that the whole thing is kosher. Just want to finish this last din, very, very applicable din over here. This is the Alter Rebbe speaking in Hilchos Pesach, this top man base of Yud. And the Alter Rebbe is speaking about Dover HaMaimed and being Mavatal a Dover HaMaimed. And this is also something which is used, I want to say universally. It's certainly universally as far as North America is concerned. I've heard rumors about France and Eretz Yisrael. Both of them are not substantiated. I communicated with somebody in Eretz Yisrael today in the kashrus industry, whether it's true, these rumors I'm hearing. He said he heard the same rumors and he doesn't know. But the situation is as follows. When it says in Pirkei Avos, tzfas b'tzfas asuya, had to be made of shabbos bein hashmoshes. How are you going to make the first set of tongues? You have to hold it with tongues. So the shaila is, if you're making cheese out of other cheese, so like who made the first cheese? Where did it come from? So all the cultures and the renets and all of these things, starters that are being used in the industry, even from Chalav Yisrael, they're being made from Chalav Akum. They're starting with Chalav Akum cultures. You have certain things where the grains, the name slips my mind. You have a type of cheese now, so type of cheese that's very, very, very popular today, and it comes from Kafkaz, and they have grains, and you put it and you make it the cheese, and you save the grains and you keep using them over and over again. They don't dissolve into the cheese, and nobody else in the world makes them. They don't know what to make them. They're a special type of cheese. In any case, we have Chalav Akum cultures. So how are you going, and it's Dover HaMaimed. So how are you ever going to end up with a Chalav Yisrael kfir? Thank you very much. Yeah, kfir. Yeah, the grains, and they sell it. Once went to a factory was making kfir, and I had to isolate that part of the factory from the rest of the factory because that part was all treif. Any case, so. What do you do with these Chalav Akum cultures? So the Chalav Akum is Issur D'Rabban, and you have it clear over there in Shulchan Aruch that this works. Whether it works for other things or not is a question. But for Chalav Akum it works. And over here, so Yash and Nas Afil Mitvu. I'm not going to read it inside. They're talking about making mashka for Pesach, and you were maimed with Shmara Shecher. The Dover HaMaimed was chametz. So what happens is, it says that, what's the din of Dover HaMaimed? We say that let's say you use Kavis Nevela. So what happens? You use a little tiny bit of Kavis Nevela, you made a whole bunch of cheese. So the Lashon in the Gemara is that Kilo Emet Be'en. The Rishonim give different expressions, but the same idea. It's not. It didn't become bottle. What's pshat? The keva became bottle. The whole thing turned into cheese. You see, in every last brekel of cheese, you see the effect of this kevis nevela. So what do you mean it's bottle? The thing is aimed be'en. So does it ever become bottle? So you take some from the first cheese, and you take a little bit, and you put it into some Chalav Yisrael, and you make some other cheese. Then you take some of that, and you make it to another cheese. The chura keeps on going forever. And that's what the Alter Rebbe says in the first half. You take this chametz and you put in pesadik, in some pesadik liquid, and then you take some of that and you put it into another pesadik liquid. You keep doing it, goes on forever. They were making honey. They were making alcoholic drink out of honey. It always remains Dover HaMaimed. But v'yesh misha emer. This is you have Rabbeinu Yerucham. You have Ponemeris later. Yesh misha emer shemeid vash haravi. That the fourth one is mutter. That the keich of the Dover HaMaimed expires after 3, has expiration date. If you don't allow it to be drunk, you can have a hefsed meruba, so you allow it. So here you put the keva, and in this case, he's putting keva and he's making cheese. He put it into the first one. Somebody had a lot of fun doing this, I think. And then you took a little bit from the first cheese and you put it into the second cheese. Then you took a little bit from the second cheese and you put it into the third cheese. And you took from the third cheese and put it into the fourth cheese. According to the Yesh Mishayim, this cheese is mutter, even if you use a davar amayimit. So the shayla is whether this works with something which is asma deraisa or only works with something. There's an issa derabbanan is a whole other discussion whether you can apply it to this. But lemaisa, this is the way b'chal chol of Yisrael cheese is made today. You mavatal 3 times the culture in a chol of Yisrael culture. You do it 3 times. You get a mashkiach to do it, and then the fourth one is how they're making the chol of Yisrael out of it. Let's see, a few minutes left. So the Chol Nimtza B'Keva, I'm sorry, I'm going to finish. I want to be left over for next week, and we're almost finished over this. So Ramah says you need shishim, yeah, the Chol of the received tam, and the shach, yes, the obvious shayla, it's a davar amayimit. So the Chol of Nas and the Vela, take the first, the shayla, the Chol of Nimtza B'Keva, yeah, so it was Nas and the Vela. Madum is battle b'shishim. Have a davar amayimit ain't a bottle of Aleph. The same thing applies to the keva too, but it even applies to the milk, which is the Bosor was nasa neveila. So the shach asked the question. So what's that? The shach brings another bit of terutzim. But they could mekivan shacholav shenasna mitama keva Bosor is nechan rachan rabban because it was covered from malich and it's not that official. Einu nechshav keiser atzmi lishn davar amaynet. So the question is that you look elsewhere in Ilchos Taruvas, even in Bosor b'chalav, that we don't differentiate. We say chticha nasa neveila, but Bosor b'chalav everybody holds that. So just like neveila. Okay, but just like nevela is not the same as nevela. So the shach says it's not considered to be isra atzmi, and therefore shishim is going to be enough. And we don't say it has the chumrah of a davar amayim. It's a long shach. It's very you say this. They quote many places. And the shaila is would it apply to any basa b'chalav? So he's only bringing one that has beidim over there. 2 has beidim. If you look in the Sefer and Kaplan Sefer on the psukim of the Alter Rebbe, he disagrees. Matal Ashkenazi Olav Shalom had 1 hezber, which is the ikir to be a medayik from the Alter Rebbe. I'm not sure either deal because it's so clear which of the reasons the shach is giving. This the Alter Rebbe holds the main reason. But whatever the case is, everybody agrees. The final line is that we have bittul b'shishim is good. Final point, very important. Well, next the final point. The final point from the Mechaber Ramah. Ora keva. Sometimes you salt it and you dry it out till it comes like a piece of wood, and then they fill it up with milk, and it still has an effect on it, but it's mutter. Has a mutter. It dried out so much like a piece of wood. It has no lechluchis basar in it, and therefore doesn't have the status of Bosor. So can you dry out the keva? Here you have a case that poured a bunch of milk, evidently what this is supposed to be. They poured into keva and they're scooping out the cheese over there, and they say it has no lechluchis Bosor and it should be mutter. So Ramah holds that it's mutter, and the shach says lachatchil you shouldn't do this. Okay. Now, if there's shishim, the Rabbi Kiva Eger wants to put together. If you have shishim in the gevina and neged era keva, it's going to be mutter, which looks like mutter lachatchil. Trying to find a heter how to make cheese using keva. So if you put together that's eitz ba'alma, it just became like a piece of wood. So if it's all dried out and you have shishim, so Rabbi Kiva Eger wants to be matter. Chasam Sefer is not so happy about this, and he needs another tziruf he wants to have a zagedim. First of all, there should be a davar nesef, and he wants that it shouldn't sit 24 hours in it. And then he'll be matter perhaps the ruba the Chasam Sefer. So if you can't make the cheese any other way, I mean today you can, but if you can't make it any other way, is that called already b'diavad or not b'diavad? There's also a question: if it's sitting over there for 24 hours in the liquid, does it get moistened? So even though it doesn't have its own moisture, but maybe it gets softened and it's no longer considered to be eitz, and you can reconstruct it. So if it became Nislam Mechilas Adam as one gather, if Nislam Mechilas Kelev it's another gather, whole discussion. Let's say you cooked it. If you cooked it, if you soaked it, would that be enough to reconstitute it, to give it back its highest, and it's no longer going to be considered eitz ba'alma? So that's a whole discussion nachrein. There's a Piskei Tshuva over here, very, very interesting, and he brings down from Shilos and Shuvas, I think it's called, that he brings down that this heter of eitz ba'alma, it's Piskei Tshuva Chof, Shilos Tshuva Tiferes Tzvi. And he speaks about Shekos B'Teilom Adum Mishum Yavshim Meisim B'Tzevim Meisim Mashke Yain Sorov the Mutter Gam Kim Mitamza, that you take insects and you make red dye out of them. And today this is done. You see it all over. It's called carmine, and it's made out of insects. It could be this is what the Teilah Shani was that they used in the Mishkan. There's also insects which are used for red dye. And over there, the Piskei Tshuva wants to be matter based on its Yavash and based on this heter from the Ramah. This heter from the Ramah has a lot of mileage. You have in Siman Kuf Yud Dalet at the end, it says the Rashba didn't eat saffron because in Spain, first of all, they used to sprinkle wine on the saffron, today for wine, and also they used the saffron as the most expensive food. If I have time, I'll show you a PowerPoint they found today also, that in order to extend its the weight, they take little threads of dried out meat and they mix it in. So Rashba says they take treifa meat, and veils and treifas, and they put it over there because the red strands, you can't tell the difference in the dried out meat and the saffron, so it's much cheaper to meat than the saffron. So they used to mix it in. So Rashba says over there, the Machaber brings it down at the end of Kuf Yudal and Yeridea. So the Shach says, finds that we're not worried about it. First of all, they don't sprinkle the wine in our countries. A bunch of different hatadim. Among the hatadim, the Shach mentions is this Ramah over here, that it became nisyavish keitz ba'alma, that the meat itself, and that's a big machlekes achreinim. Can we say this same thing over here, that it became eitz ba'alma? We're not worried about the bliyat. The bosor itself you're going to eat. Whether you can apply that over there as well. So unfortunately, we ran out of time, and the application of all of this, here you have a label. So you see over here, these E numbers. So this is in the European Union, all food additives have numbers. So here you have chemere taficha, that you make things, the dough condition things that cause them to rise. Chemere ma'ak v'chimtzun is antioxidants, is this numbers over here. And that's all shaila. We have many shailas today on all of these additives. First of all, you have to know they're nascent tam, because you have concentrated flavors and things like that. Maybe they're less than shishim, but they're still nascent tam. We have a shaila davar amaymid, or famous shaila when you have a preservative. So if you didn't put the preservative in, so then it would go bad in 2 days. You have a loaf of bread. You put the preservative in, it'll stay for a week. Is that called maymid? You have an emulsifier which keeps the oil mixed up in the peanut butter mushroom. Is that called maymid? If you didn't have it, then it would separate. So many of the poskim say that it's not called a maimid because it didn't make something, it prevented something from happening. It didn't make something happen, but you have other ones that make something happen. And there are poskim that say that even a preservative is also called a davar maimid. Then we have problems with many of these things. If they're also b'teles l'chatchila, then we have derech hasiyos b'kach. That if it's in, you can't say something is bottled. The Rashba says, and Beishesev paskins like him, that derech hasiyos b'kach, that if it's now also in Alchas Pesach, that if it's part of the recipe, I can say it's bottled. They obviously need it. They're putting it in here. So here you have these are emulsifiers. Okay, all different. I have it in English over here. Here's from the Health Canada, the list of food additives: anti-caking agents, bleaching, maturing, dough conditioning, coloring, emulsifying, gelling, stable, all of these different things, which in very small amounts can have a tremendous amount on the food. Firming agents, is this called the davar maimid? All of these things. Here you have from the FDA, the list of ingredients. Here, this is what it is, and this is what it does. Examples, you know what it's going to look like on the label. So you have coloring, so that we have clearly in the chazusa is not bottled, that we have from Chazal. But you have flavors and flavor enhancers and stabilizers and emulsifiers to prevent things to change. You know, people, anybody on the call over here, we have some zakanim, and everybody going to show their age, that remember the kosher Pesach toothpaste. They used to have the toothpaste used to come out of the tube in breklach, because in order to make the toothpaste smooth, you need a glycerin. And the glycerin was mostly of an animal source, so they wanted not only be not chametz, but also be kosher. So you'd squeeze it out, and it'd come out little like pieces of like half-dried cement would come out of the tube, because they weren't using any glycerin. Today you have vegetable glycerin; it's not a problem. You can make normal things like that. But so too gelatin, which causes something to become solid. You have humectants, that he had over here on the Mishamre lechut is a humectant which keeps the humidity, anti-caking agents. That's they call it him marneh, his gaishus, I believe that's what it is. And anyway, all of these different sorts of additives doing different sorts of things, and enzymes are a major issue in many different sorts of foods, just to make everybody's life complicated. So only went 6 minutes over, not so bad, but we'll make a siyum on Sim Peizayin. Very important chazara. Went through a lot of chemer and a lot of inyanim mikrim, and they come up again and again throughout Shulchan Aruch. So it's not only important for understanding Peizayin, it's Kaveh Brach Latzman, but all of these, many of these inyanim get chazar over later on in different contexts. A very important chazara, and the sooner do chazara, if you can do it tonight before you go to sleep, it's even better. But to do a chazara as soon as possible, do it tomorrow, and Mirz Hashem, everybody will remember it and chazar over the whole simon and game weiter. Any questions?
There's no better qualified enzyme for the Chol Yisrael. All Chol Yisrael is like that?
In North America, to my knowledge, it is. Like I said, I've heard rumors.
Shouldn't the Hadassah have to qualify that this is all the Evid to the consumer?
No, just told you. What can I
wouldn't pay
the reason they're giving a hechsher on it is this was Amashim explained to me. He says that since there's no other way to make it, that itself makes the bidiyah into the chatchil.
Cheese though.
You could live without cheese. You could live without milk. You could live without a lot of things. But that's it's again, there are those that heter of being mevatel 3 times for an issa d'Rabbanan. Many poskim also lechatchilos, and Alter Rebbe also b'diavad, but this is
that's only yes mishayimer that whole heter. That heter of the 3 times.
He paskins, have some merubah. Nobody will be able to eat cheese. Would be have some merubah. All the pizza shops would have to close. Rahman al-Islam. What would do without pizza? What would you eat after Pesach? No, I'm making a joke. There's such a gather in halacha about something which is yefsha ben yanachas, and it has that's already called b'diavad. So that's the heter they're relying on. The kashrus agents are relying on a lot flimsier heterim than this. I hate to break it to you, but there's but a lot. This simon looks like there's horns and hooves and keva and who in the world would be maleach a keva and use it for something? But this is the yesod for all of these additives over there. Many of them are maimed, and the emes is it's an area of halacha that is not leis b'mashasha. At what point do you say that it's maimed? If you improve the texture of something, you change the texture. So clearly, cheese, everybody agrees over maimed. You take a liquid, you turn it into salad, and if you take milk and you turn it into yogurt, and if you take lebanon and turn it into yogurt turn into lebanon, I don't know which one is thicker. At what point you take a stabilizer to make ice cream more smooth? At what point do we say it's maimed? And many of these are sensitive ingredients, processing agents. So the one way we have a help of processing agents, if they're the heter derech hasiyose is not so much of a problem, but that's for taruvas. Can't learn kol terekul on one night. Okay, I have to go to Ma'ariv. Okay, Rabbi Sai. So we're off the week of Lag B'Omer, but before that, so we have next week, and then the week after that we'll be off. Okay, gute Nacht.
Nacht, Shkach.
Kol tuv.